Hi, Chief.
Hey, Mayor, how are you?
Good. How you doing?
I'm doing good, thanks.
Good.
Hi, Mayor. Hi, Bob.
Hi, Tom. How are you?
I'm good, thank you.
Hey,
Good.
Tom, good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening, everyone. I'm calling to order the regular session meeting of the Board of Commissioners of the City of Tarpon Springs on Tuesday, September 8th, 2020 at 6:30 p.m. Ms. Jacobs, roll call.
Mayor LaHousas,
Here.
Vice Mayor Carr,
Here.
Commissioner Terrapini,
Here.
Commissioner Donovan.
Here.
Commissioner Vaticiotis.
Here.
Tonight's invocation will be given by the city attorney following the Pledge of Allegiance.
Thank you, Mayor. Our Heavenly Father, as we strive to serve the people of Tarpon Springs tonight, we ask not for your concern for us, but for the men and women of the United States Armed Forces serving abroad who face danger every day to protect us as we exercise our rights and privileges as free citizens of this great land. We ask that you protect them and give them comfort to their loved ones, make their absence from home and family short, aid them in their accomplishment and their tasks, and bring them back safely to their families as soon as their mission allows. This we pray. Amen.
Thank you.
Amen.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic,
for which it stands,
one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I'd like to remind to everyone that due to the health crisis we continue to face, the meetings will continue to be conducted by video conferencing and provide for public comments to protect the public and the employees. And we now go into the public comments of the items that will not be discussed tonight. If you have any comments, please state your name and your address for the record. You'll be given 4 minutes. Ms. Jacobs, have we received any emails?
No emails are received.
Thank you. Mr. Jump, do we have anyone who's wishing to speak?
If anyone would like to speak on this, please raise your hand and you'll be allowed to talk. We do not have any raised hands at this time.
Did we lose the mayor?
Yes, sir, it does look like we have lost the mayor at this point.
Okay, Mark, you want to go on? Or you
Yeah,
want
go
me to-
ahead, Vice Mayor, take over. I'll make sure he's getting back on.
Okay, just to clarify, Mr. Jump, there's no public comments, correct?
Yes, sir, that is correct.
Okay. The first item on the agenda is an impact fee study. And I'm assuming this is going to be Mr. Herring or Mark? Yeah.
Good evening, Mayor, Commissioners. Ron Herring, Finance Director. Tonight, we have a presentation of the city's impact fee study for police, fire, library, parks and recreation, and general government impact fees. Mr. Napoli, Senior Consultant with Stantec, is here to present the study. Also online is Mr. Eric Grau, Principal with Stantec, who has worked on numerous studies for the city. And with that, I will hand it over to Mr. Poli to go over the presentation.
Thank you for that introduction, Ron. Good evening, everyone. My name is Peter Napoli, and I'm the lead consultant on this project from Stantec. And as Ron said, I'm joined by Eric Grau, my colleague, who's the project manager. This time I'm going to share my screen and bring up the presentation. Okay, we have a brief presentation for you guys today that summarizes the results of this impact fee study. As Ron said, we looked at the police impact fee, the fire impact fee, library, parks and recreation, and general government. These impact fees were last updated in 2008, so it's been quite some time. And essentially, impact fees are a mechanism for new development to fund the cost of infrastructure necessary to serve growth. The fees are adjusted annually by the city in accordance with the ENR, which is the Engineering News Record Cost of Construction Index. The current impact fees are shown in the table below, and you have two customer classes, residential and non-residential. Stantec was retained this year to evaluate and update these impact fees as appropriate, incorporating the city's fixed asset registry, the most up-to-date county property appraiser data, and the local census data. Some of the key updates to your impact fees, we incorporated a new approach, the plan-based, well, not a new approach, but a different approach from the original approach, and that's the plan-based methodology, the standard-based methodology. The current fees reflect the plan-based methodology that was adopted in 2008. And that methodology essentially is based on the system expansion increment for projected new development. And this relies upon level of service standards projected into the future for each of these departments or services. As I said, that was the approach taken in 2008, but we felt this year that the standards-based approach would be better suited for the city. So we implemented that approach, and that spreads the cost of the existing system across all of the equivalent units within the city. This is the most common industry practice for these types of fees. We also included a sales tax credit to avoid the double recovery of sales tax funded capital investments. The city benefits from a sales tax in place, and the revenues collected by that sales tax are used to fund capital projects. We back this sales tax credit out of the fee to incorporate or to reflect the revenue that will be received from future residents as they come into the city, because they'll be paying the sales tax as well. So this slide here summarizes the results of the residential customer class, and these are the impact fees shown at full cost recovery. So you can see in the first column, we have each fee listed out, and then the current fees are listed next to them. The updated fees are then listed, and then we show the change for each fee. And you can see it's kind of a mixed bag, but on the residential side, it's mostly a decrease in the residential impact fees, with the exception of the general government. And we then presented the changes between current and updated in the graph below. This next slide summarizes the results of the non-residential fees for each of the impact fees. And you'll see that library and parks and recreation are omitted because those two fees cannot be charged to non-residential properties. Overall, there is increases in each of these fees, and the general government being the most significant increase. Now, it was our understanding the direction of the city is to not consider any increases to any of the fees or rates going forward. So we were directed to present to you the recommended fees at a rate that reflects no increase to either residential or non-residential properties. And you have the ability to adopt impact fees at any cost recovery below 100%. So that's why you can adopt these fees at a lower percentage to avoid any increases in the current fee schedule. So this first slide here shows the recommended fees adopted at the lower cost recovery percentages. And that's shown on the rightmost column. You can see that cost these fees represents. So we'd have to adopt the police, fire, and general government fees at a lower cost recovery in order to avoid any increase to the residential and non-residential side. This slide summarizes the lower cost recovery, and you'll see that for the non-residential side, that was driving most of the need for this lower cost recovery because the study results showed increases on the non-residential side, and we don't want to increase those non-residential fees. So at these cost recoveries, we are maintaining that same non-residential fee for each of the different services. Now I'm going to show you the survey that we did of similar municipalities throughout the state that also charge these impact fees, and we'll show the difference between current and proposed. This first slide here shows you the police protection impact fees. On the residential side, you can see the current fee is closer to the top. The proposed fee brings you right into the middle of the survey. And then the non-residential fee remains the same. Fire side, you'll see that the current fee is at the top of the impact fee survey, and then the proposed is going to bring you to the middle of that survey. And then same situation for the fire impact fee. It's you'd be adopting the exact same non-residential rate. Library and parks and recreation impact fees. Similar situation here. On library, you can see that you're at the top of the survey. The proposed fees would bring you towards the middle of the survey. And then the parks and recreation, you're already kind of in the middle, but it brings you a couple steps down. And then finally, the general government impact fees. Currently, you're towards the bottom of the survey, but the proposed fee at the lower cost recovery percentage would bring you even further towards the bottom. And then the non-residential would remain the same, also towards the bottom of the survey. So in conclusion, our updated fees reflect the standard-based approach, which is most common in the industry for these types of fees. We've incorporated the sales tax credit, and these impact fees must be just and equitable. That's why we're adopting the same cost recovery for both residential and non-residential. The current non-residential impact fees are shown below, and the recommended residential impact fees fall within the survey range. And with that, I'll conclude my presentation and can field any questions that you may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Napoli, for the presentation. First, I want to ask for apologizing for losing the Wi-Fi connection. But Mr. Napoli,
Yes,
in plain words, would you please explain again the difference between the plan-based and the standard-based approach?
Absolutely. And it is sort of a complicated subject to approach, but essentially the plan-based reflects a plan going into the future. So if the city was adding a certain amount of residents over the next 10 years, and you had a plan for adding fire stations for each increment, like say every 1,000 residents, you would incorporate that cost and then divide it amongst the residents that you plan to add to the city. The standards-based looks at the current investment in the city. How many fire stations do you currently have, and how many people are currently in the city? And you would aim to maintain that level of service going into the future. And so you would spread the cost of the current investments over the current residents, and that's how you would get that cost per unit of new growth.
Thank you. Mr. Licouris, is Mr. Herring on the call?
Yes, he's there.
Okay. Mr. Herring,
Yes.
the recommendations of Mr. Napoli on page 6 shows the impact fees for residential will be reduced $1,026, 33.5%. What effect that is going to have on the budget that we work in with 2020, 2021, we're about to approve?
It's going to just have by my predictions, just a slight decrease in each of the categories of the different impact fees. So not too drastic.
So that's something that we should be able to handle then, right?
Correct.
Thank you. Mr. Napoli, I have one more question that I'd like to ask you. On your page 8 and 9, you're comparing Tarpon Springs with other cities. Do you have a data that shows the surrounding cities having police and fire departments? Because the city of Dunedin that you compare us with, they do not have police and fire. Their services comes from the sheriff's department. Does that make any difference?
That means they probably pass those fees down from the county. It doesn't make a huge difference, and not every city in the surrounding area is going to have the same impact fees. Not a lot of cities avail themselves to all of these impact fees. So we tried to find the most comparable municipalities in population size. However, whether or not they pass it on from the county or not, we felt that it was still valuable to include in the survey. So that probably just means they pass that through.
Okay, thank you. I'd just like to say that I'm very pleased. Last year, we were able to reduce the millage. This year, we're reducing the impact fees. Congratulations to our staff. Thank you. Vice Mayor Carr, any comments?
Thanks, Mayor. Just a quick one. So there were some adjustments made, but when you made a comment that staff said they didn't want to see any increases. So you adjusted the general fund and reduced some of the other areas. Was that just to avoid an increase at all? Because I know we're reducing it significantly, which I support, but I just want to get a little bit of the thought process behind that.
So with the impact fees that had recommended reductions on the residential side, but increases on the non-residential side, in order to achieve a decrease or avoid an increase on both sides, we had to adopt that same cost recovery. So it may further reduce the impact fees on the residential side.
Okay.
The reason you can't adopt the residential fee at 100% and then adopt the non-residential fee at 50%, because then it's no longer fair and equitable.
Understood. Okay. Thank you.
Commissioner Terrapini?
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Napoli, I appreciate your presentation. You're definitely thorough and knew your stuff. And I did have a question. What's your relation to Dr. Napoli?
Oh, no relation.
None? No, I thought you were his grandson. I was going to tell you, you saved me a couple times. But back to business, I would say that I'm pleased to see the decrease in terms of the impact fees. I think $1,000 per residential household regarding the police, fire, library, parks and rec, and the general government is definitely a step in the right direction, in my opinion. We've heard for many years now from just, your ordinary resident who's lived here a long time and has decided to build a family home that our impact fees are outrageous before they even stick a shovel in the ground. So I'm definitely pleased to see the decrease. Just for benefit of the public, could you give an example of some of the things that would be covered in the general government impact fee?
So the general government impact fee represents all of the public facilities, but mostly not all of the public facilities, I misspoke there, but the public facilities like the city hall. So if there was any kind of incremental expansion of city hall because you needed to serve new growth and for example, there wasn't enough office space at city hall and you had to hire more people in order to expand the departments because the city was growing rapidly, those funds would be used to expand facilities such as that. So impact fees can only pay for capital projects that are associated with an expansion of service, not a renewal and replacement or anything such as that, or operations and maintenance. So it would have to be something related to the city hall and the city hall related facilities in order to expand proportionally to service growth.
And given that we don't have any known future large expansions, right, as it relates to some of our buildings, or like you mentioned before, in a different circumstance, being fire, if we're going to build a new fire station. But given that we don't have any known large expansions, is that how you were comfortable using a cost recovery of about 13%?
Yeah, that definitely factored into it. And yeah, you'll be pretty limited in what you can spend those impact fees on going into the future. Yeah, over time, they should amount to something that can be used if the city needs to move city halls or expand the footprint of the buildings in order to provide those core city services.
And for example, if we were going to plan a big expansion in the future, then at that time we might want to go back to considering a planned approach.
Well, that could be true. If you typically the plan-based approach serves communities that are growing more rapidly. So say the city started to annex a big area from the county and services needed to grow really quickly in order to serve those new pockets of service areas. Plan-based approach may work better for you, but typically the standards-based is more commonly accepted for all these types of fees, and it's easier for you to update every 5 years. That's our recommendation, is to relook at these impact fees every 5 years, so the change isn't so radical, and you incorporate the latest data. But I would say that I don't see many scenarios where the city would want to switch back to that plan-based approach.
Your information was great, and I won't argue with $1,000 reduction in our impact fees. So appreciate the presentation.
Absolutely.
Commissioner Donovan?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Mr. Napoli, for the detailed presentation. Again, really happy with the results. My only question left for you would be, I guess, how often do you recommend that we do one of these studies? Because we just did one now, and we see kind of the big difference that it makes, and it was last updated, 12 years ago. So I guess what's the kind of the prudent timeline of doing these studies?
Yeah, we recommend every 3 to 5 years in order to avoid big shifts in the fees. As you saw on the full cost recovery percentage fees, there was some pretty big shifts for all of the fees in both customer classes. So we recommend every 3 to 5 years, the city comes back and looks at, updates the fixed assets that are the underlying factor in these fees, and the population data and the property data.
Okay, I appreciate it. Yeah, it's definitely something to take note of. I don't have any other questions other than that. I think the rest of the board asked some really good ones.
Thank you. Commissioner Vaticiotis?
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Napoli, how, going back to Vice Mayor Carr's comment, the no increase in cost, and maybe you can't answer this, but whose idea was that? Was that the commission's or was that the staff's or?
Well, it was the general direction that we felt that it was a good recommendation to make for the city to avoid any increases, any fees and rates this year in particular, because of the sensitivity of this year. However, I think it was the general opinion of management and finance that would also be the best recommendation to put forth.
Well, let me, since it's management, city manager LaCourse, whose idea was it?
I would say the pulse of the commission over the last couple of years about these and doing this study. I think that was the pulse of the commission to for those being hopefully lower. So that's where that came from.
Yeah.
I agree. If I could, Mr. Vaticiotis, if I could just chime in. I think we have 3 new board members over the past couple of years. So we have had some extensive conversations just throughout Board of Commission meetings about lowering the millage rate. There's nothing official, I think, that was put on like an agenda to discuss it, but it was been discussed multiple times over the past 3 years plus.
Well, when I appreciate the fact that there's 3 new commissioners, but there's 3 new commissioners. So when was this study started?
I'm sorry, I was also going to mention.
When did you start the study?
Oh, I'm sorry. We started the study at the end of 2018, and it continued on for some time because there was a few pauses. But it was also worth mentioning that when we evaluated the city's position in the market surveys, and we saw that some of those fees, you guys were towards the top of the survey, we felt that it would be a good recommendation to make a lower cost recovery adoption to bring you to a more marketable range in that mid range of the survey.
Right. No, I'm not, whenever we can, we're not giving money back to the residents, but whenever we can decrease the impact later, it's always a good thing from my perspective. And I'm really interested in the process. I think the results are good. How common is this backing into the impact fee approach that you took? You said no increased cost, and then you kind of did what you had to do based on the standards approach to back into it. Is that typically what you do or what you see at other cities?
Yeah, I've worked with a lot of these impact fee studies across the state, and that I think 8 to 9 times out of 10, it's this methodology, the standard methodology. The data is more available and it's easier to access, and it's just administratively easier, I think, every time you want to update the fees as well.
I don't mean the methodology. I'm talking about actually the target. No increase in cost. We want to increase them by 10%. We want to increase them by 20%. Do you get that type of direction as part of this?
Absolutely. Impact fees are commonly adopted at lower cost recovery percentages because of some kind of direction or feeling that either the city would want to. I've had cities that want to encourage growth, or they even put a moratorium on impact fees sometimes, or adopt them at real low cost recovery percentages. So it's very common to adopt impact fees at lower cost recovery percentages.
Okay. How would this, now just to use an example, we've got our library, it's 22 years old. There hasn't been any appreciable expansion at all. I would say that our population's about 5% more, or maybe about 20% greater than what it was when it was first built. Did you take that into account? Let's say some kind of an expansion on the library in the future. Is that part of the formulation of your results?
So how we factor in the fixed asset data, we calculate the replacement cost new. So we take the library's original cost, and then we increase it to account for the inflation since the time it was constructed. So in order to represent the investment that it would take to replace that library today. So if the city was going to expand their library services for any reason, mostly to serve new growth, say that the new building had a footprint that was 10% or 20% larger than the current library, that would be an expansion of services. Then 10% or 20% of the cost of that new facility would be eligible to be paid with those impact fees.
Did you take that into account in the current study?
Yes, yeah. The current study doesn't reflect any future plan of capital improvements. It just reflects that current replacement cost of all the facilities within that department or service.
It exists today, as it exists today, as far as footprint goes, not anything larger.
Yes.
All right. Well, that's probably something that the commission needs to talk about at some point in the future, not obviously tonight. And then the cost recovery percentage, I understand how you got there. In our ordinance, we're recommending an automatic increase, which I'm going to talk about a little later when we get to that ordinance, of the construction cost index of the ENRCC. Was that Stantec's idea, or is that something that's come from the staff?
It was most likely our recommendation because we did, well, Burton and Associates are the previous firm, and before we changed company, was involved with the 2008 study. And in all of our impact fee studies, we recommend that cities increase their impact fees to match the cost of inflation each year. So the ENR CCI is just the index that we use to account for the increase in inflation. So it was most likely part of our recommendations in 2008.
Okay. Yeah, I don't disagree with that. The only question I have is the automatic part of it, where it's automatically increased. And we'll talk about that later. But I think that's all I had. I thank you very much for the presentation, and it's always good to learn a few new things. So thanks.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Mr. Napoli. Mr. Licouris, you have anything that you'd like to add?
No, sir.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Napoli. We'll move on to consent agenda. Item number 2 is the satisfaction release of liens. Number 3 is the award bid number 200145BJL diesel generators. Are there any items that you'd like to pull?
Mayor, I'd like to pull the diesel generators.
Okay. Do we have any commission comments on number 2, satisfaction release of liens? No. Ms. Jacobs, have we received any emails
No emails were received.
on 2 and 3, right?
Correct.
Thank you. Mr. Jem, do we have anyone that is wishing to speak on these items?
We do have a raised hand at this time.
Okay. Go ahead, Mr. Sorokas. Mr. Jem, I guess you can hear us.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Jem, do we have anybody else that is wishing to speak?
We do not have any other raised hands at this time.
Mr. Anthony Sorokas, are you there? I guess it dropped off. I need a motion for item number 2.
So move to approve.
Roll call.
Need a second?
Yes, we did. We got second.
Commissioner Donovan,
Yes.
Commissioner Carr,
Yes.
I'm sorry, it's the wrong sheet. That would be Commissioner Vacciotis,
Yes.
Commissioner Donovan,
Still yes.
Commissioner Terrapini,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Clark,
Yes.
Mayor LaHousas.
Yes, thank you. We go to item number 3, which is the diesel generators, Commissioner Vaticiotis.
Mayor, the question I had on the diesel generators, we're getting these from California. And I'm always a little concerned about ordering equipment with such long distance, because if there's something wrong, that's who we have to deal with. And I also would, maybe I don't see it in the backup, as far as the installation and the maintenance of these diesel generators. Is there any information on that?
Mr. Licorice, do you have any information on that?
No, Bob, are you on here for that item or for something?
Yeah, I'm here to help cover this one.
Okay.
My assumption, I'm Bob Robertson, Project Administration Department Director. I'm covering this item for the Public Services Department tonight. My assumption on this is the price does include the installation. I know your backup doesn't say it, but in speaking with the utilities superintendent today, I believe that is the case.
And what about the maintenance?
I think typically you'll have a 1-year warranty on these, but I don't believe past that period. I don't know. I don't have any information about maintenance. I'm assuming it's not included.
And what is the brand of the generator? Who's the manufacturer?
You have two parts. You have the generator manufactured by a company called High Power Generators, and then the motor is provided by Yanmar Motors.
Okay. I'm not sure how the rest of the commission feels, but I really get uncomfortable ordering 3 large generators like this from California without, with there being, in my opinion, a few loose ends of how these are going to be installed and maintained in the future. Maybe the staff's comfortable with that, and if we get the city manager's assurance that there's not going to be any problem with that, I don't have an issue, but they're going into a particularly critical use for us with regard to the potable water system. And you know, when you order something like this and you've got oil leaks or something else, there's always a dilemma in trying to deal with somebody out of state, for example. And I've had personal experiences of that. So, you know, whether they send somebody down to repair them and then it's not a brand new generator as you had purchased. So I'm not sure how the rest of the commission feels about this. And maybe City Manager LaCourse can discuss that a little bit. If the rest of the commission doesn't have an issue with it, then obviously I'm going to go along with the purchase, but I just don't like the little information that we're provided on something. The cost is not, it's under $100,000, but it's a critical component in a very critical system that we've got. And I just want to make sure that we've got the right equipment and that's going to be reliable and that there aren't going to be any other problems, spare parts or whatever. The Yanmar engines are very common. I haven't heard of the generator head manufacturer before, but you know, I'd just like to hear if there's any other comments from the commissioners.
I don't have any comment. The only thing I'd like to ask Mr. Licorice, do you feel like we have the expertise in our workforce to maintain 3 small generators?
Well, I believe so. Again, I think you're covered because Mr. Smith is back a couple of days later than we expected him back. So I don't have Mr. Smith here. I'd have prepared to get that information if I had it a little earlier. So, I mean, I'm confident if Mr. Smith proposed it and did his research on it, I'm confident in Mr. Smith and what he has to say. But obviously he's not here tonight for this item.
I personally feel comfortable that we have capable people to maintain 3 small generators. Commission comments?
I have no issue with it, Mayor.
Commissioner Terrapini?
I would just say that I think it's a valid observation and point on Commissioner Vaticiotis' on his end. You know, I mean, I would definitely prefer to go with a company that is either in Riverview or Oldsmar as far as being more local. But I mean, given that they're, you know, diesel generators that at this point, you know, in our world are pretty common, I think that if need be, we can probably service them all right.
Commissioner Donovan, any comments on that?
No, Mayor, I'm good with it.
Okay.
Yeah, Mayor, the only, I mean, getting back to Commissioner Terrapini's observation, I mean, we've got companies here like from Riverview, Oldsmar, Bartow, Jacksonville, Tampa, Edgewater, and yeah, we're focused on California. And the one in Riverview is about $3,000 more than what we're paying, which is about 5%. And I just think that we need to take a little closer look at people closer to Tarpon Springs in this regard in the future, and kind of looking at them as far as service and reliability as well, other than just relying on a warranty that somebody else might show up and they're not invested in that somebody else sold them to us. So their job is just to fix them. So, but that's all I want to say about this. Thank you.
Thank you. The chair will entertain a motion on item number 3.
Do we need comments on this one, Mayor?
Oh, go ahead.
No, I mean, do we need public comment on this one? I don't think
We
took
already
public-
asked earlier on 2 and 3.
Okay, I make a move to approve.
Second.
And roll call, please.
Commissioner Vaticiotis,
Yes.
Commissioner Donovan,
Yes.
Commissioner Terrapini,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Carr,
Yes.
Mayor LaHousas.
Yes, thank you. We are now going to the special consent agenda. Item number 4 is tentative schedule for recruitment and selection internal auditor. Staff report.
Yes, we have Ms. Niffen on here to give the report on the suggested timeline, which may change, as she'll tell you, because the application or lack thereof. So Jane, if you give the presentation of a tentative timeline that might have to be
Yes.
moved.
Yes, I believe the original scheduled closing date for this advertisement was actually 30 days and within September 14th. In the backup, it mentions that as of last Thursday, there were no applications. I can confirm that as of 4 o'clock today, there were still no applications. Having said that, I need to make the comment that we have observed since the advent of the pandemic that the recruitment process generally, not just for us, but for a lot of organizations, has tended to slow somewhat. We are having to accommodate testing and so on and interviews via virtual means. Sometimes it takes a little longer to get them set up to make sure everybody is available at the right time. And we have to actually redo our testing process to permit an oral type of test. So what I've given you is a very tentative schedule. It's very fluid because obviously it'll depend on the number of applications. It'll depend on where these people are coming from, what absolutely talking about giving you time to look at your short listing, which may vary considerably. The times and the dates I have given you are basically what I would consider to be extremely generous in the sense that these are probably the furthest dates out given this the first closing date of September 30th. However, that obviously will change depending on what we receive. We have been advertising on our website. We've been advertising on Florida League of Cities, the FGFOA, and also the Florida Internal Auditors Association. As of now, we're hoping that we will get some applications through this process, but we may have to revisit depending on what we receive. So as you can read through the tentative schedule, we have listed giving you a week and a half or a bit longer to actually do your final selection. Any of these processes can be shortened depending on the number of candidates we receive. The only portion that may take has to do with the background check, depending on where these people come from and what kind of background they have. And finally, the pre-employment physical and drug screen. Those are pretty much two things that are somewhat out of our control. We've had good luck so far with our background checks. Sometimes the physicals and the drug screens take a little longer. As you look through here, if you want to make any changes, if you have any suggestions, I can redo any of these dates and steps. Does anybody have any questions or concerns?
Mrs. Niffen, since we don't have any applications yet, I guess the timeframes on the schedule is meaningless. But the question that I have is any way that we can advertise for this position out of state?
Yes, I can do that. I can do the International Internal Auditors Association. That is global. I'm not sure you want to go that far, but if you do, I'd be more than willing to.
Well, I was wondering if we have a way that we can actually advertise out of state, for the in the United States, not global.
Yes, I will attempt to find, I'm sure there are national, in fact, I can, when we place an ad, even if we were to use the international, we could specify that, preference will be given to US residents.
Mrs. Niffen, what will be the cost if we hired a recruiting company?
We have not done so in a long time, so I would have to do some research on that to give you a ballpark figure. I would think it could be in the vicinity of 10 to 15,000, but that's just a ballpark guess. If you want, I will do some research and come back to you with actual quotes.
I would like to hear from my fellow commissioners, but if we don't get any applications, we might have to go to that route.
Just remember, a lot of times on ours, we have to extend our applications for another 30 days. So I wouldn't go into any of those things of recruiting or that. The first thing I would do if we got a couple or didn't get enough would be to extend the advertisement for 30 days and then evaluate from there to go another method to go. That's what we've had to do on some of the other jobs. So that would be my recommendation.
But it's good to see what it will cost in case we decide that we don't want to hire a company, a recruiting company, just to have an idea.
Mayor, so I've experienced recruiting companies pretty often in my line of work, and they run anywhere between 20 and 30% of the salary that's being placed.
True.
Okay.
And since we don't use a whole lot, 20% would be, I think, difficult to get. It's probably be more like 25 to 30 if I had to guess, because we don't use a multiple recruiting. We don't recruit a lot for positions. So just from what my experience is on the procurement side with recruiting services.
Okay.
If I may, Mayor,
Sure, go ahead.
I do support extending it for another 30 days. Ms. Niffen, does the city look at like Indeed or Monster to post these positions at all? I know I've had success in my professional world with Indeed more than anybody else.
We have used Indeed. In fact, we use it quite commonly for middle management and frontline positions. We have found that in the past, the targeting for professionals, if you put it in their journals and their publications and that, we tend to get better results. But we have used Indeed, we have used Career Builder, Monster. The problem with that is you'll receive probably hundreds of applications, of which maybe 10 might be suitable.
Entry level, yeah.
Again, we can do that.
So, I mean, from my experience, I think just involving Indeed might be a good way to go, or Career Builder, to get some applicants. At least it gets people talking. And what I've experienced is, like, if someone's looking for a job, they'll know another friend that's looking for a job and they saw it posted on Indeed and they'll let them know about it. So I think that will help expand our application base as well. Thank you.
Thank you. So you recommend you to extend it for 30 days?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
Commissioner Terrapini?
I'll support the extension as well. I don't remember exactly what we set the salary range at. What was the upper end of the range, Ms. Niffen?
The upper range was $98,549.
Got it. I put the good word out.
Commissioner Donovan?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I strongly agree with Vice Mayor's comments about putting it on Indeed. Stuff like Indeed, LinkedIn. I know we probably get a lot more dud applications for sure, but I think, that's definitely the place to start in terms of getting something. My main question on this is how many applicants would we need before this process starts? Because obviously if we have like 3, decent applicants, Are we going to wait to start the process because we don't want to force anybody into this role that might not be, truly prepared for it? I mean, how many qualified applicants until we begin the process, I guess is my question.
That is something the commission could decide, but I can tell you that in the past, we have posted jobs without a closing date. We put open until filled, which means if you find yourself with a complement of good people, you don't have to wait for a closing date. Whereas technically speaking, if you post a closing date, it could get a little dicey if you don't wait for that date to pass and somebody submits an application prior to that date and you've already started the process. You would probably have to include that person, go back and include them in mind you, if they were qualified. But what we've done in the past, and we've been pretty successful with it, is to post it open until filled. And that gives you more flexibility.
Okay. I guess this is kind of a premature conversation. We'll see what happens after the extension. But I definitely don't want to force anybody into this role. I don't want to settle. So hopefully we get some good applicants in.
Okay.
I don't have any other questions other than that. Thank you.
Commissioner Donovan, just clarification, you're supporting the 30 days extension that
I
was
support the
recommended?
extension.
by
Yeah,
Vice
the
Mayor?
extension and posting it online more.
Thank you. Commissioner Curtis?
Yeah, I support the 30-day extension. Ms. Niffen, are we doing something to advertise in the nearby cities, city governments in particular?
We can ask to post them on their websites, but we don't usually get a lot of response on that. We can, the reason we have not posted it in the Tampa Bay Times, I go back to our last 2x3 ad was $2,500. And right now they're only publishing twice a week. I'd rather go directly to Career Builder rather than have them post it. It's probably cheaper to do it through Career Builder than it is through the Tampa Bay Times. But we can do anything you wish.
No, I'm not interested in the newspapers. I'm more interested in a friend of a friend that works for City of St. Petersburg or City of Tampa, City of Clearwater, has a friend that wish they could be an auditor or something like that, professional. And it's just a way of getting the word out. I feel that the other city staffs are very good at that, getting the word out. They're much larger cities than we are. And quite frankly, I'd rather have somebody in a nearby city coming to work for us. As I said before, it would be very helpful for that person to be able to have friends in other nearby cities that they could ask questions of in their profession rather than being kind of the lone voice on a city staff where they're operating independently. So I would like to do that. Right now, I'm not interested in doing Career Builder or anything like that. I'd like to wait the 30 days before we do that. I don't know what we're going to get with these other companies, but I don't want to waste their time, the applicant's time, and I certainly don't want to waste the commission's time on this. Have we gotten any calls, any inquiries at all about the position?
As far as I know, the answer would be no.
Okay.
We could, I could possibly send the link. We do have it posted on our website. And it has a more detailed than say an ad on the professional publication. But we could send it to other cities and ask them to maybe post it so that the word would get around. I don't want to poach some of their employees, but on the other hand, if you're looking to look at people by word of mouth, that might be a way to do it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I don't consider it poaching other employees. I mean, I've had employees where there was no room for them to grow at the city of Tarpon Springs. Before, I've encouraged them to go elsewhere, and they've always been friends of Tarpon Springs after that as well. And I think likewise, if the city of St. Pete, for example, has got some really sharp guy that everybody's filled those positions above him, and they're not going to, and they're equally good. I'd like ability as well. So we're all in it together, I guess, in the Tampa Bay area, and I'd like to kind of work together in that regard. I know we were going to talk at one time and maybe City Manager can remind me a little better on this. We talked about the salary, but we kind of left the selection process until a later date. And I thought that was going to be something like tonight. And I see where the dates that you have, you provided, if we the date of closing would be September 30th, and then to submit the applications to the City Commission for review October 2nd. I'm not sure how all this is going to play out with Monster or Career Builder, if there's at least 3 commissioners that want to go in that direction. But I wouldn't want to be myself in a position of looking at 15 or 20 applications, and maybe Ms. Niffen, you're more comfortable in that, but I thought at one time, and I remember, Mayor, you said that maybe I'm wrong if I don't remember correctly, but the Budget Advisory Committee could potentially help us scan the applications and come up with 3 or 4 finalists. Given that we've got that number of applications that submit, I would say the way we're going right now, doing it very professionally and very selectively, we're not going to get that large number. But if we open it up to some other large online search firm or go internationally, where we're limiting it to the United States, we could potentially get 10, 20 applications. And I'm not interested in making it 10 or 20 applications myself. I think that would be better for somebody with a little more experience, like the Budget Advisory Committee to do in the finance area.
Let's see how many applications we're going to get. If we get a lot of them, I guess we can ask them to help us out. But at this time, we don't know.
Okay.
Yeah.
But I do want to leave that open, I guess.
Yeah, sure.
Commissioner, could
That
I-
was a recommendation, but because we don't know how many applications we're going to have, we didn't pursue it.
No, it doesn't look good right now.
Yeah. So we.
Commissioner Vada, could I, this is Ron Herring, Finance
Yes,
Director. Commissioner Vaticiotis's question about the local area, I did send the application out, the advertisement to our local chapter, which does go to all cities around the Pinellas County, Hillsborough, Pasco County area. So that was sent out to the local membership in our Gulf Coast area, if that helps any.
Yeah. Mr. Herring, is there any feedback from them at all that you might get in your local chapter that maybe they think the salary range is right on or too low or?
I personally, I have not heard anything yet, but I can ask them.
Okay. The one thing, Mayor, you brought up, I'm not sure what you referred to it, but a search firm is what I would use as a term. And we buy more than just a search firm finding somebody, potential candidates. They also can advise of the people that they know that may be potential candidates, what they think the salary range and other things like that. So I'm okay with extending it to September 30th, but at some point, I think we're going to need a little help in this. Something is a little more, focused in finding some qualified candidates that can give us some feedbacks of salary ranges. Remember, we set the salary range ourselves based on some information that Ms. Niffen had provided from other cities. You also asked a question, what other internal auditors were doing in similar cities of similar size to Tarpon Springs. That didn't pan out because there really weren't any, but somehow we've got to get some direct feedback from people that might want to apply, but for whatever reason, they're not applying. And I can't tell you whether it's going to be salary, location, or something else, but I don't want to continue kicking the can down the street in hopes that somebody shows up that might want to be an internal auditor for Tarpon Springs. And if we need help, I don't have an issue with spending the money to get that help. So.
Well, right now, if we're going to extend the time for 30 days, let's see what applications we're going to get. If we are successful, fine. If not, we can look at the second step. And this is very important position, and spending, was 10%, 20% of the salary. It's probably going to be a good investment if we think we're going to find somebody that's very well qualified and is going to do a good job.
I agree, Mayor. Thank you. And Not whether we
That's
adopt.
why I brought that up, you know?
Right, not whether, notwithstanding whether we adopt anything I'm saying tonight, I want to put it on the table in hopes, or not in hopes, but in case this comes up again in 30 days, that we need to, this isn't something, a new discussion we're having. We talked about it 30 days previously. So
Yeah,
thank you, Mayor. I'm done.
thank you. We now go into the public comments. Ms. Jacob, have we received any emails?
No emails.
Mr. Jump, do we have anyone that is wishing to speak on this item?
If anyone would like to speak on this item, please raise your hand and you'll be allowed to talk. At this time, I see no hands.
Okay, thank you. I will entertain a motion to extend it for 30 days, and then the schedule that was provided to us will be adjusted accordingly.
I move to make a motion in that regard, Mayor.
Thank you.
Second.
And roll call.
Commissioner Vaticiotis?
Yes.
Mayor, I'm sorry, can I get clarity real quick? I'm not sure if it sounded like the majority of us supported putting us either on LinkedIn or Career Builder or Indeed. Does staff need a better direction on the motion, or what do we need for that?
I didn't hear that, Vice Mayor Carr, but if you want to poll the commission, that might be helpful, because I wouldn't adjust my motion unless there's at least 3 commissioners that want to do that.
Yeah,
I would like to do that. I don't see a need to do that at this point.
Okay, just from hiring standpoint, if you post it on your website, you're not going to get any applicants typically. What I've seen, so I just want to put it out there that Indeed and LinkedIn, you're targeting ultimately people that are be looking for these positions. But
I mean, I'm okay to openly advertise in other places. I just don't want to spend I don't want to spend 10 grand to do it.
Is that what's going to cost Vice Mayor Carr?
it shouldn't cost that much to put it on LinkedIn and Indeed. It should be a couple $100 at most.
I wouldn't think so. I thought I heard something about 10% of the job description. So I mean, if you say that's $100 grand, that's where I got the 10 grand from.
Yeah, that's like for a direct recruiter. Like we hired a recruiter to do recruiting, it would be like 25-ish%. But to post it like on LinkedIn and Indeed, I mean, that's where really people are looking for jobs today on these areas.
And that's, I mean, I know what LinkedIn is, but the other one's just a normal host site of recruitment site. Yeah, I'm okay with that. I just don't want to spend in excess of $1,000.
I withdraw my motion and let somebody else make the motion then.
So, I'm happy to make a motion to extend the recruiting process for another 30 days and also direct staff or the city manager to post the application on Indeed and LinkedIn.
Second.
And also to adjust the schedule that was provided to us based on the 30 days.
Yes.
Second.
Ms. Jacobs, roll call, please.
Commissioner Vaticiotis?
Yes.
Commissioner Donovan?
Yes.
Commissioner Terrapini?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Carr?
Yes.
Mayor LaHousas?
Yes, thank you. Okay, we're now going to item number 5. Property and casualty workers' comp insurance staff report.
That'll be Ms. Niffen again.
Yes, Honorable Mayor and Board of Commissioners, I'd like to recommend that they approve the renewal of our city's property and casualty and workers' compensation insurances with the Florida Municipal Insurance Trust, who does business as the Florida League of Cities, for a 1-year period starting October 1st of 2020. We have received the renewal this year. What happens in property tends to be a little more stable than the work comp. This past year, I think I said in the background that most places, most entities use a 3-year smoothing period, and that's to prevent great spikes each year in your work comp. We have obviously, since our experience mod has gone from 88 cents for every 1,000 or every 100, sorry, to $1.06. It obviously indicates that we have dropped a good year and picked up a bad year. And I can tell you last year was a bad year for work comp. Primarily because we had a couple of large claims, one being an employee who almost had his arm ripped off, being dragged around being dragged under a log. As it was, he ended up having to be taken to Pinellas and day flighted to Tampa General Trauma Center. That claim is in excess of 6 figures. And we do have other settlements out there for a presumption statute for another employee, a third employee who actually stepped backwards off a trailer and ended up fracturing ankle, and it has not healed. So work comp this year has not been good to us. So we've seen actually a 15% increase in work comp, 1% increase in the property and casualty, which isn't a bad thing considering what's happened in the last 3 years in Florida with regard to catastrophic events. The other thing that I need to mention is that since 2007, the city has been receiving what the league has named the return of property premium. And what happens is they go back 3 years, and if they have any excess, they refund it to their members based on a per capita basis. So this year, there was no return in premium. Since 2007, we've received almost $500,000 in return of premium. This year, probably because of people or names like Irma, Michael, etc., there is no return in property premium. So that also affects our bottom line. So overall, there is a 6% increase. But as Mr. Herring pointed out, it still is a net budgeted savings of $30,000, a little over $30,000 as to what was budgeted. I will entertain any questions.
Yeah, thank you, Mrs. Niffen. The workman's comp premium rate is increased 50% because the claim ratio increased from 0.88 to 1.06. Would you explain the formula and how do they actually calculate that?
Okay, it's very similar to what happens with the healthcare. What they do is, and of course, they blend it over a period of 3 years. So that average tends to bring it down if you've had a bad year and a good, heaven forbid you have 3 bad years. But what they do is they look at for every dollar they spend. Last year's, every dollar they spent, I should say for every dollar they took in, they spent 88 cents. This year, this past year, for every dollar that they took in, they spent $1.06. As you can understand that that's not a good way to be progressing. As I say, it's a little more flexible, or should I hate to use the word volatile, but it's a little more, how do I put it? It moves a lot because of the years. We can have good years. We also have settlements for past workers' comp claims. There are a number of things that factor into it, but as far as the experience mod itself, it has to do with the amount paid out versus the amount taken in. Does that make any sense?
Yes. In other words, this year they spend more than they received. Mm-hmm. Yeah. We were able to compare the rates with another provider?
No, we have not.
Do you think the other providers probably provide a better deal?
I would say that with work comp, you'll probably be in the same position with every other, because it does depend on your claims. There's not a lot of wiggle room in that, so much as there is in property. I would say wiggle room, but property is more stable. The work comp can be a somewhat a bumpy ride depending on your years of claims. So if you went to another company, you'd probably have a very similar rating.
Thank you. Vice Mayor Carr, any comments, questions?
Yeah, I've got a couple questions. To follow up on your question, Mayor, Ms. Niffen, when was the last time this went out to RFP? From
I would say probably 10 years ago.
Okay. So I'm in full support of doing an RFP from an insurance standpoint. I would like to direct the city manager that. I'm not sure what the rest of the board feels, but I would encourage that just to see what's out there. I'm not saying you're doing a bad job in managing this. That's not what I'm trying to say at all. I just think it's good to see what else is out there. And then secondly, is this like when people trip and fall and we get lawsuits in the city on sidewalks? Is this where
No.
all this go to?
That comes under general liability.
Okay.
Our GL is not in bad shape, but it is our work comp, and that has to do with employees. Accidents, claims, settlements, those kinds of things that do add up.
So when it says property and liability, is it if someone gets hurt on like a city property, like a building? Is that different?
No, that's the actual property insurance. We have under insurance over $87 million worth of property. The liability portion includes auto liability and general liability. And
Got it. Okay.
Fall. We do have a few of them, but we do have a stop loss of $25,000. So in any claim, we pay the first $25,000. That's our, if you want to say, deductible. And beyond that, it becomes the responsibility of the carrier.
Okay. And then I guess my last question is going to be the property values. I remember talking about this, I think in years past. That's something someone evaluates every couple of years or so. Is that right?
We've done it. I think the last time has been 4 years ago.
Okay.
Property, I'm told that it does not, commercial does not fluctuate in value the way residential can. It's somewhat more stable. I do know that when it comes to the property values for the last couple of years, they have not increased with the league.
Okay. Got it. I mean, the biggest concern would be not if we lost one building, but if we had a catastrophic event where we lost multiple buildings, it would be the biggest issue.
Yes.
So, okay. I don't have any further questions. Thank you.
Commissioner Terrapini?
I don't have anything to add, Mayor.
Thank you. Commissioner Donovan?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I would just say, Ms. Niffen, you're doing a great job. I was pleasantly surprised with this report. I mean, whenever you look at any insurance, you're expecting to see it go up. But I was actually pleasantly surprised, even with our work comp mod. Another simple way of explaining that is that like a 1.0 is average. So say last year we were, 12% below average, which is a good thing. This year we're still, I mean, it's a big increase, but we're still only 6% above average, which is really manageable. So I was pleasantly surprised with that. Same thing, property rates being increased by 1%. I'm fine with that as well. I'm always willing to look into it. It can't really hurt to, I guess, quote unquote, shop it out. But again, really pleasantly surprised with this report, and thank you for all that you do.
Thank you.
Commissioner Matiquiotis?
Thank you, Mayor. Ms. Niffen, I think I know the answer to this question. We do have an accident prevention program in place. Is that correct?
Yes, we do have, and we do get a credit for it on our premium.
I know we've talked about the street cleaning schedule. We've talked about building preventive maintenance. Is this something that can be, and don't get me wrong, I guess I should say, I would like to get a briefing on it sometime without bringing the rest of the commission in, unless the rest of the commission would like a briefing or a presentation on it. I'd like to understand that a little more. I was a little surprised that the rate wasn't higher this year as well. So I'm okay with that, but I'm always liking to learn new things. So I don't know anything about that, and this gave the opportunity to ask that question. So I'll leave that up to the rest of the commissioners, and if I don't hear anything, I'll follow up with the city manager to see if I can get a briefing on it at some point in the future. is with regard to Vice Mayor Carr's question on the RFP, is there, I know sometimes there's a little bit of an issue with having somebody that you've done business with, and there may be something in the contract, but I know there is in terms of, for example, property insurance. If you continue on with one carrier, and then you don't continue with that carrier any longer, and you find that maybe you should come back to them, now all of a sudden you're off on a different rate scale than if you had been a continuing customer all along. Is there any reason of why we should not do an RFP? Is there, if we explore the idea of pursuing somebody else, is there any penalty to that in the future on this? And I guess what I'm asking is how many other carriers would be out there, somebody similar to what we have right now?
There are a few. They all have their pros and cons. I know of one in particular that once you sign up with them, you have to give them about 10 months advance notice that you're going to leave them. So they get you locked in. But that's no reason not to have a look, if that were the wish of the commission.
Well, I mean, based on what Commissioner Donovan said, I think we're fortunate in that regard. And I don't have a problem with continuing on with what we've got in place right now. And if the commission would like to do an RFP, maybe the next year would be something, City Manager LaCourse, that we can explore, unless the commission wants to. I guess the idea is maybe not approve this tonight and go out to an RFP. I'm not sure. Vice Mayor Carr.
Well, my recommendation is to go ahead and approve that, but also we need to take into consideration the return premium that Ms. Niffen spoke to us just a while ago. So in the past, we were able to receive quite a bit of money on that.
Yeah, no, I'm fine. I'd like to continue on with what was presented this evening, and anything new or different we would do in the future.
Yeah.
I'm good, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. We're going to go to public comments. Ms. Jacobs, any emails?
No emails.
Mr. Jump, do we have anyone that wishes to speak on this item?
If anyone would like to speak, please raise your hand. And we have no raised hands at this time, sir.
Thank you. It's back to the commission. Any other comments on this item?
I just have a quick comment. I intend to approve this tonight. I was talking about for future years, I think we should look at an RFP just to see what's out there and available. And I'm happy to make a motion to approve.
Need a second?
Second.
Roll call, Ms. Jacobs.
Commissioner Vaticiotis,
Yes.
Commissioner Donovan,
Yes.
Commissioner Terrapini,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Carr,
Yes.
Mayor LaHood.
Yes, thank you. Next is item number 6 is the extension of business recovery program. Mr. LaCourse.
Yes, again, it comes time to see if we're going to continue this for another month. I don't think we have any issues, or I've heard no complaints about the outdoor dining, the outdoor displays we've been letting the business do with COVID. Obviously, things are still continuing. The businesses, some of them, a lot of them are still struggling. So with the lack of complaints, as you can say, and the ability to help a lot of businesses, I'd recommend this be extended at least for another month. We've been extending it month by month, so at least extend it for another month.
Thank you, Mr. LaCourse. Well, I'll be talking to restaurant owners about that. They are very, very pleased that we have that, because the indoor capacity still remains 50%. And many customers don't like to go indoors to eat. They want to sit outside. They feel more comfortable with sitting outside. So they like the idea to go ahead and expand the outdoor seating capacity, at least for another month. So I am supporting that. Commissioner Carr?
I have yeah, no comment on mine, Mayor.
Commissioner Terrapini,
I'm good with it.
Commissioner Donovan,
Happy to support it.
thank you. Commissioner Vaticiotis.
I'm the same, Mayor. I just had a question for the city manager. Is there anything on the horizon coming out of the governor's office or anyone else? We haven't got a whole lot of information as far as the 50% rule or increasing that or anything else. Have you heard anything?
No, I thought we were going to get something in early September. I was thinking more the first, not as after the holiday. Maybe we'll start to hear, but I thought we'd start hearing some more, at the latest this week or next week. So we're still waiting.
Yeah, it's surprisingly quiet. So thank you. That's it.
I just want to say that I'll be attending the audio conferences on those issues on coronavirus. They haven't decided what's going to happen in the future because the numbers are still climbing.
Thank you.
Public comments, Ms. Jacobs?
No emails.
No emails. Mr. Jump, anyone that wishes to speak on this item?
If anyone would like to speak, please raise your hand. And we have no raised hands at this time.
Thank you. It's back to us. The chair will entertain a motion.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Roll call.
Commissioner Vaticiotis,
Yes.
Commissioner Donovan,
Yes.
Commissioner Terrapini,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Carr,
Yes.
Mayor Lanusse.
Yes, thank you. Well, next is item number 7, Penn Street and Gross Avenue drainage and roadway improvements. A is the Alto Construction Company stipulation and settlement agreement, and B is the award of bid number 200100BJJ Penn Street and Gross Avenue drainage and road improvements. What I'd like to do is to, since the 7A and the 7B are related, will be discussed together, but we're going to vote separately. And we're going to go to staff report.
Hey, Mayor, before I get Bob, I want to thank Bob Robertson and our city attorney for work on this. This is another one of those cases on for the Penn Street project, a major project that we're trying to begin, that we've got a lot of grant money that's on the line, and we were able to get an extension on that grant money because of this difficulty. So I want to thank the hard work. I'll let Bob Robertson go into some of the details of what we've tried to negotiate. Obviously, a company that did the bid for whatever reason asked to withdraw. Obviously, we took the step of either getting their bond and working on that. They got an attorney involved, which we got an attorney involved, and we've been in negotiations to try to keep it out of the court system and legal fees. We think we've come up to a solution if the board approves it on this, and I'll let you take it over from there. And then if there's any specific questions about the agreement itself, then I'm sure the city attorney can deal with those issues. But why don't you start off, Bob, explaining after the many talks with the company and the lawyer what the compromise deal we're proposing to the commission.
Happy to do so. Thanks for the comments, Mr. LaCourse. I'm Bob Robertson, Project Administration Department Director. And for this item, we're asking the board to authorize the manager to execute a settlement agreement with Alto Construction Company Incorporated. So back in May of this year, the BOC awarded a construction contract to Alto Construction for the Penn Street and Gross Avenue drainage and roadway reconstruction project. Since that time, Alto has stated that their bid is erroneous and sought to withdraw their construction bid. Alto claims that there are deficiencies in the bidding process, which we deny, and the city has the right to register a claim against the company's bid bond, and if contested, could result in litigation. So with both parties wishing to avoid litigation, we've negotiated a settlement proposal for your consideration tonight, written by the city attorney Rob Eschenfelder, and through which the following would occur in summary. First, Alto would be permitted to withdraw its bid as they requested. Second, the city would not seek to recover damages through Alto's bid bond. Third, the city would not debar Alto or preventing them from future bidding opportunities. And four, essentially in exchange for these conditions, Alto would self-perform a small construction project at no cost to the city on behalf of the city. The project would consist of furnishing and installing about 800 feet of new 6-inch potable water pipeline to be installed in the Mears Extension Corridor. The purpose there to improve fire flow and water quality. Alto is the contractor in control of the Mears Extension Corridor at this time, and they are the company building that roadway. So it's kind of a maybe a win-win there. We've provided plans and specifications for this work, so it would be done to city standards, and city staff would oversee it, just as we do any other city project. And for your information, we estimate the construction value of this work to be about $80,000. This settlement proposal is to the city's advantage because without resolution, we cannot proceed with the Pentgross Stormwater Project. The Pentgross project is cooperatively funded through a grant, as the city manager mentioned, from the Water Management District from SwiftMud, and it is important to get the project started in a timely manner. Alto has already agreed with the, has already approved the agreement and has signed it. And your approval of this item tonight would be considered, as the mayor said, along with the next item, which requests approval to rescind the award of the contract to Alto and awarding the bid to the second lowest bidder. That is my summary on this item, and I will stop there for questions.
Thank you. Mr. Robinson, thank you for your work on this, on all the projects that you do. We appreciate it. The question that I have is to Mr. Trask. What's your legal opinion in regards to the agreement? Are we okay to do an agreement like that?
Yes, it's been negotiated. Rob Eschenfelter, who is our procurement specialist at the law firm, he was the one that negotiated, drafted the agreement, negotiated it with the other attorney. We are very satisfied with the way that it currently reads. We're recommending approval of it. We think that as a direct result of entering into the settlement agreement, you've recovered $80,000 worth of work and not have to fight to force the performance under the contract or fight for the bid bond. And you'll remember that the bid bond is 5% of the project cost. So we think that it's a very, very good result. We've saved a lot of attorney's fees and a lot of time in court by getting to this point in this settlement agreement. So we definitely feel comfortable with it and we're recommending approval.
Thank you, Mr. Trask. Did they explain why they think they want to pull away from this project?
I'm going to leave that to Mr. Robertson. He would have a little bit more information on that.
Is it because they made a mistake or something, or what?
Well, that is what they say, Mayor. They say they made a mistake. They also point to some what they call deficiencies in the bid, which I don't believe are there. But they do primarily lean on the mistake angle, that they made mathematical mistakes and are unable to perform the work for the price they bid.
Thank you. And you feel comfortable for the second lowest bidder, which is the American Pine Line Construction?
Yes, we did check the references. They got mostly pretty good reviews, and we feel comfortable that that bid is, although it's significantly higher than the Alto bid, it's still lower than the engineer's construction cost estimate and lower than our budget. So even though it's a high number, it's still within our budget.
Thank you. Well, I think we should accept the offer of the Alto Company and award the contract to the second lowest bid, which is the American Pine Line Construction, and we move on. Vice Mayor Carr, comments, questions?
Yeah, just a quick comment. Mr. Trask, you said the bid bond was 5%. Is that right?
Right, it would be 5% of the original bid. The original bid was $2,284,781.25. So the actual bid bond value is about $114,000.
Right. And if it's spot tonight and we say no as a commission, then we potentially put the risk of the $1 million grant, I believe, from Swift Mud. Is that right, Mr. Robinson?
Yes, it's a $1.36 million grant.
Okay. And then, Mr. Robinson, just for confirmation, it was about an $80,000 project that they're willing to do at no cost to the city.
Yes, that's our estimate of the value of the work.
Okay, so we're looking at a difference of around 34,000 by going this route. Yeah, I'm going to support this. It's a weird. I mean, the city's going to have to pay almost $1 million more with the next company, but I don't really see a fighting over $34,000 in the bid bond process with attorney fees. I think we could exceed that pretty quickly in this process. So I'm happy to support this tonight, although it's a bummer to see that we're going to have to pay more overall. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Terrapini.
I don't have a whole lot to add, Mayor, based on some of the discussion that we've had already in the background from staff. But Bob, why do we have to just go to the next bidder? That's a time frame thing. We can't rebid the project to see if we can save some money.
That would be a procurement process question. I think the answer would be we could rebid it if you elected to do that. But I think it's in our best interest, both in terms of the grant that we're risking and the fact that although it is a higher number, like I said, we're still within our budget.
Is there a risk with the grant funds in rebidding?
There could be because of the delay associated with that.
You see any other risk associated with it other than?
Well, you were also, risking getting higher numbers. Now that the bid numbers have been seen,
Gotcha.
You can't predict how the market responds.
Right. Okay. I mean, aside from the fact that it's going to cost us more money, I'm all right with the, this form of the settlement. Thank you.
Commissioner Donovan.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Really just want to thank Mr. Robertson and Mr. Trask. I think the backup was really well read. And I mean, to be honest, I don't want to gamble with the grant. And I think the timing that you mentioned makes a lot of sense. So I'm going to support it. Obviously, not the best conditions, but I appreciate your guys' work to make it as right as we could.
Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Vaticiotis.
Thank you, Mayor. I've got a couple, obviously, what are you going to do? Throw a tantrum over this thing at this point? I do have some questions, though. Just in our bidding process, and I assume that, Mr. Jackus is part of this. I think Mr. Robertson, you might be part of this. But you've got one bid that comes in at $2.28 million, and then you've got the next lowest one at 2.21. Does anybody I know we deemed the bids to be complete, but does anybody ever talk to these people to double check and triple check before they actually sign? They signed the contract, as I understand. They're claiming that because we didn't, the contract wasn't valid. So they signed it. But I mean, it's almost like, I think there's some responsibility on our part to say, are you guys sure of this? And that, I think, would make a difference. Certainly their company's reputation is going to be hurt out of this, I would suspect. But do we do this? Do we double or triple check, or we just deem them to be complete? We come to the commission asking for $2.28 million, and then later we find out these guys made a numerical mistake, and the next higher bid is, next lower bid's $3.21 million.
Yes, sir, we do. And in fact, we took this bid and went line by line and compared it to the others and compared it to our engineer's estimates so that we thought that we might be okay with 2.2 million. Some of the places that Alto had shown significantly lower numbers were things like mobilization. The fact that they were mobilized for a major construction project very close by seemed to be reasonable as an explanation why their mobilization costs in their new bid were so much lower. Another item was, I believe, MOT, maintenance of traffic. Often contractors will sub that out. And sometimes if they can do that in-house or internally, their internal costs can be much lower. There were things like that that were unusual, but not unbelievable. So we did definitely take a very quick look at that before we recommended award to the Board of Commissioners.
But they confirmed the questions that you asked, that things were unusual, but not unbelievable. They confirmed that they were correct.
Yes, we had the procurement director do that.
And is he on board tonight?
No, he's on vacation.
He's on vacation. So City Manager LaCourse, can you confirm that Mr. Jackus asked those questions?
I don't know specifically for sure if he did or not.
All right. The new contractor's timeline, Mr. Robertson, what is that? The same as the Alto, or is it different? The completion timeline? And
They would be all working.
Pardon me?
I'm sorry, Commissioner. Please, I interrupted you. Please.
The mobilization and also completion timeline. When do they get started and when are they going to be done?
Well, we've yet to reach out to that contractor, but they'll be held to the same timeline that was put in the bid. I don't recall the number of days that were provided in that bid, but well, it'll be the same number just based on when we issue the notice to proceed.
But do we know when they will start?
No, I don't know when they'll start exactly.
Okay. And I would assume that we've confirmed with this next lower bidder that their bid is still valid.
Yes, we have.
And getting back to Commissioner Terrapini's question, the terms of the grant, I know you had this in here somewhere about how long we have to spend the money to actually do the contract. Or is it based on we have to start the contract by a certain date? Can you go over that?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I don't have the contract in front of me, so I don't recall the details, but typically the way those cooperative funding grant project programs work with the Water Management District is they have a fixed schedule and a fixed deadline. In this case, we know we won't be able to make that, so we're going to have to go to the governing board to request approval for a no-cost time extension on that grant. Those are typically very, very readily approved, but at this time, I don't know exactly the schedule. What I wanted to do was get through this process here, assuming it was approved, if it was approved tonight, then take a look at the schedule and adjust and ask the governing board of the Water Management District to approve a no-cost extension based on what we anticipate time of award.
All right. Well, I'm hoping our luck stays with us the same as these other folks, that they have no objection to extending their terms of the grant. So that's all the questions I have. It's an unfortunate situation. I'm glad we're able to get the $80,000 water project as part of the MERS. But I just think that, I don't like these. City manager, in fairness to him, he said that this is nothing new. That's happened to us a couple of times before, where the low bidders looked at his numbers and has balked on us. We've seen that with the signs and things not too long ago. So it's a little grousing on my part. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. We're now going to the public comments on the items 7A and 7B. Ms. Jacobs, have we received any emails?
No emails.
Mr. Jump, do we have anyone that wishes to speak on the item 7A and 7B?
If anyone would like to speak on this item, please raise your hand. And we have no raised hands at this time, sir.
Thank you. I will entertain a motion on the 7A, which is the Alto Construction Company Stipulation and Settlement Agreement.
Motion to approve 7A.
Second.
Roll call.
Commissioner Vaticiotis,
Yes.
Commissioner Donovan,
Yes.
Commissioner Terrapini,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Carr,
Yes.
Mayor LaHousas.
Yes, thank you. Now we need a motion for the 7B, which is the receipt, the award bid number 200100 BJJ Penn Street and Gross Avenue Drainage and Roadway Improvements.
So moved.
Second.
Ms. Jacobs, roll call, please.
Commissioner Vaticiotis,
Yes.
Commissioner Donovan,
Yes.
Commissioner Terrapini,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Carr,
Yes.
Mayor LaHousas.
Yes. Next is the item number 8, the ordinance 2020-27, impact fees. This is the first reading. City Attorney, if you please read the ordinance.
Mayor, Commissioners, ordinance 2020-27, an ordinance of the City of Tarpon Springs, Florida, amending Chapter 2, Administration, Article 6, impact fees for police, fire, parks and recreation, and library services, specifically Section 2-92, by decreasing or maintaining at the same level for the police, fire, library, parks and recreation, and general government impact fees, providing for repeal of ordinances or parts of ordinances in conflict herewith, providing for severability, providing for inclusion in the Code of Ordinances of the City of Tarpon Springs, Florida, and providing for an effective date of this ordinance. That was the first reading of ordinance 2020-27 by title only. There will be a second reading held on October 6, 2020. This has been advertised and published in the Tampa Bay Times by title only, or will be on September 13th, 2020.
Thank you.
And just let me say something about the date. I'll be talking to you later on about some dates. The reason we have the 6th is I'll be proposing later on a CRA meeting that night. Because of the advertising and the fact that St. Pete Times has changed their advertising to make it less, we had to change the date. So that's why, pending your approval of the CRA meeting on the 6th, that we put a special session and put the second reading on for that date so it can take into effect. We originally had planned to put it in effect October 1st, but we can't do it with the amount of advertising time that we have to have. So we would bring that forward before that CRA meeting on the 6th of October.
Thank you. I have no comments, questions. I was already covered with the item number 1. Vice Mayor Carr,
I have no questions or comments.
Commissioner Terrapini.
No questions or comments, Mayor.
Thank you. Commissioner Donovan,
No comments, Mayor.
Commissioner Vaticiotis.
I have one there. Section 1B. In that, there's an addition in there on the ordinance that says that thereafter the foregoing impact fee shall be increased or decreased on October 1st of every year by the percentage which the construction cost index published by Engineering News Record, commonly referred to as ENR CCI, has increased from August of the preceding year to August of the then year. I'm uncomfortable with just giving a blank check to this. We don't know what the increase is going to be one year or the other. And we talk about an increase, but there could be hypothetically a decrease as well. And of course, that may be wishful thinking, but nevertheless, I'm not comfortable with giving how we would charge residents and businesses impact fees based on what some construction cost index tells us should be charged. And I'd like for there to be some consideration of introducing some control by the Board of Commissioners, such as shall be increased or decreased on October 1st of every year, as established by the Board of Commissioners, shall be based on the construction cost index, this ENR CCI. Just for, and I don't know whether you would do that by resolution or by a change of the ordinance, but I think it's important enough for us to do that. The water and sewer rates are an automatic. We know exactly what that's going to be from year to year, at least until we do our new sufficiency rate analysis this year. But this one, there isn't any percentage that's set. It's just whatever this construction index tells us it would be is what we should do. Does any commissioner have any thoughts on that?
Anybody from any commissioners wants to comment on that?
Mayor, I've got a comment if that's fine. If we go off the recommendations on the consultant that was used tonight, on looking at it everywhere between every 3 to 5 years. I don't see the issue of using the index in this situation, because if they are to exceed or not to be enough, that if we're following what the recommendations are, then we're going to capture them and adjust it every 3 to 5 years.
Okay.
That's
Commissioner
the only
Donovan, you had a comment?
Yeah, just I guess more of a clarification. So Commissioner Vaticiotis, you're just asking that before October 1st of every year, it just shows up on one of our agendas and we discuss it or check it over?
Yeah, that would be fine too. I mean, it's in ordinance, it's in the ordinance that even if it just shows up on the, of course, we can intervene and say, okay, it's on the ordinance, so we'll change the ordinance because it's not going to work out this year. But just somehow, right now, there isn't any provision to let us know anything concerning what that increase is going to be until we may hear from some developer or something like that, it's 4% or something like that. And why is it such a big jump just before he's going to get his project started? And it's just, I'm uncomfortable setting a precedence by taking the rate changes out of the commission's hands and putting it into some nebulous construction cost index that we just have put full faith in that's going to be adequately represented. And it's not so much Vice Mayor Carr, the 3 or 5 year, we may not get hurt. It's just the principle of the fact that we're in our positions to monitor these sort of things. And I just don't like turning our responsibility over to some construction cost index and let that construction cost index do our jobs for us without even knowing what that's going to be until after it's taken into effect. That's all I'm saying. Right now, there isn't anything in this. Maybe I'm wrong, City Attorney Trask, you can clarify that for me.
I'd be happy to.
Go ahead.
Okay, you've been doing that since 2009. You've been using the same index. It's not changing. You're using the exact same index that you used since that period of time. And subparagraph C specifically provides that there will be a new rate study in 2023. So you literally have 2 years of CPI or CCI increases before it comes back to you on a new rate study. So there's nothing different than what has happened over the past 12 years.
Okay, but does that make it right, I guess is what I'm getting at.
Yeah, that's a policy decision.
Yeah, I'm a commissioner. So that's the question I have.
Wouldn't that be easy enough, Tom, as putting in something pending BOC approval?
You can just take it out completely and then, in each year address it separately, but or we can just add some language in it before the next time saying that that's what it will be unless, it's not approved by the city commission at a regularly scheduled meeting, something like that. We can definitely modify it, but
just something simple to demonstrate to the residents that we're monitoring this. That's all. And I appreciate that. I see where the ENR CCIs is abbreviated in past years, it's crossed out, and we've expanded on the title. But still, in my opinion, it's just something that I, as a commissioner, am not comfortable with, whether it was done forever. And that's why ordinances change, because they're no longer satisfactory according to the majority of the commissioners. So we need to make a change. That's all I'm suggesting.
So let me make sure if I understand this correctly, Commissioner Vaticiotis. So you recommended to review by the BOC before October 1st every year?
Yeah, it's just a confirmation. I don't want to change what's in here, but just to the commission to put us between the residents, the businesses, and this construction cost index to make sure that we know what the increase is going to be. I don't want to say, well, I don't know what it was, and for whatever reason, the city staff hasn't told us either. If some developer is asking, it makes an issue with us. I just don't want it. I don't like that. That's all. I mean, it's just just an uncomfortable feeling for me, not knowing what that's going to be, or even any provision for there to be communicated to us. And it doesn't have to be complicated. It could be very simple. Again, if the majority of the commission wants to leave it as it is, I don't want to take anybody else's time up. I just don't think it's the proper way to just turn something over that is why we're here. is to monitor those sort of things.
Okay, let me go to the public comments and then we'll come back again. Ms. Jacobs, have we received any emails on that item?
No emails.
Mr. Jump, do we have anyone online that wishes to speak on this item?
If anyone would like to speak on this item, please raise your hand. And we do not have any raised hands at this time, sir.
Okay, thank you. It's back to the commission. Do we have any comments? If not, the chair will entertain a motion.
Motion to approve.
Second.
And roll call, please.
Commissioner Vaticiotis,
I'm going to vote no on this.
Commissioner Donovan,
Yes.
Commissioner Terrapini,
You're on mute.
All right, guys, I'm clicking. I don't want you to hear. Motion, yes. Sorry.
Vice Mayor Carr,
Yes.
Mayor Lewis.
Yes. Okay, we're now going to item number 9, which is the ordinance 2020-23 revisions of Charter 20 Code of Ordinance Management of Commercial Wastewater from Dental Practices. Is the second reading. Mr. Attorney, please read the ordinance.
Thank you, Mayor. Ordinance 2020-23, an ordinance of the City of Tarpon Springs, Florida, amending portions of Chapter 20 of the Code of Ordinances of the City of Tarpon Springs, creating Section 20-38 entitled Requirements for Dental Facilities, establishing definitions for dental facilities and amalgam waste and related terms, requiring dental facilities to install amalgam separators in accordance with existing federal and state regulations, requiring dental facilities to submit a one-time compliance report verifying that said facilities have met federal requirements for installation of amalgam separators and proper disposal of amalgam waste, establishing definitions for pharmaceuticals, healthcare facilities, and related terms, prohibiting the discharge of hazardous waste pharmaceuticals from healthcare facilities to the wastewater collection system, and providing for an effective date of this ordinance. That was the second and final reading of ordinance 2020-23. It was published in the Tampa Bay Times by title only on August 23rd, 2020.
Thank you. Mr. Licorice, do we have any new information on this item? This is second reading.
I don't believe so. I know we got Thomas Kiger on here from staff. I don't think, is there any new information, Tom?
No, sir. The ordinance is unchanged.
Thank you. Are there any commission comments on this item?
No.
Okay, Ms. Jacobs, we go to public comments. Any emails?
No email.
Mr. Jump, do we have anyone that wishes to speak on this item?
If anyone would like to speak on this item, please raise your hand. And we do not have any raised hands at this time.
Thank you. The chair will entertain a motion.
So
On item number 9.
Second.
Roll call.
Commissioner Vaticiotis,
Yes.
Commissioner Donovan,
Yes.
Commissioner Terrapini,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Carr,
Yes.
Mayor Lewis.
Yes. Next is item number 10, the ordinance 2020-22, mobile food trucks. This is the first reading. The second reading will be held on September 22nd, 2020. Mr. Trask, would you please read the ordinance?
Mayor Commissioners, ordinance 2020-22, an ordinance of the City of Tarpon Springs, Florida, amending the City of Tarpon Springs Code of Ordinances Appendix A, Comprehensive Zoning and Land Development Code, Article 4, by amending sections 56.05 and 56.06, establishing regulations for mobile food dispensing vehicles, providing for severability, providing for inclusion in the Code of Ordinances of the City of Tarpon Springs, Florida, and providing for the effective date of this ordinance. That was the first reading of ordinance 2020-22 by title only, and it was published in the Tampa Bay Times by title only on July 29, 2020, and it will be published again on September 9th, 2020.
Staff report.
Renee?
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor and Commissioners. Renee Vincent, Planning Director. So as you recall, I came before the board a couple of months ago as a discussion item, a proposed set of amendments to the land development code regarding mobile food trucks and mobile food dispensing vehicles. So I'm going to share my screen, so bear with me. Let's see, I guess I want this one. Or do I want this one? Let's try this one, sorry. Okay, can everybody see my screen?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. And if I'm using the mouse, do you see my pointer?
Yes.
We do.
Okay, great. Just wanted to make sure. So how we got here. Last year, the legislature passed House Bill 1193, which became effective on July the 1st. And essentially that bill preempts the regulation of mobile food dispensing vehicles to the state. And so any kind of regulations involving licensing, registration, permits, and fees is all preempted to the state. The ordinance or the legislation also specifically stated that a municipality cannot outright prohibit mobile food trucks from the entire city. Our current land development code is completely silent to the use of mobile food trucks. Under previous interpretations, between the fact that they were interpreted as prohibited in the past because they weren't specifically listed in any zoning district. And then when you also consider under the old occupational licensing, now business tax receipts, mobile food vending was kind of lumped into the category as a peddler, which required moving about every 15 minutes. So with those two things in the past, these were basically interpreted to mean that you could not have a mobile food truck in the city of Tarpon Springs. The only real exception to that would be as you could always go through our 90-day temporary use permit process, or as part of a city-sponsored special event. So at a minimum, we need to address in our land development code some place in some manner for mobile food trucks to operate within the city. As it stands right now, with nothing in place, theoretically, they could go anywhere that they like. So, so we drafted a set of two amendments or two new sections to the code, 56.05, which was mobile food dispensing vehicles. We call that, and I'll go into a little more detail on these. And then mobile food dispensing vehicles as accessory to an existing food or drink establishment. The second piece of that, 56.06, was really aimed at and trying to address some of the consequences that we've had from the COVID-19 situation, where we have the breweries and other more drinking related establishments that don't serve food. So they have been basically prohibited from operating or reopening because they don't serve food. I'll defer to Karen Lemons later on if you have questions about kind of the status of where that is. I think there's been some relief for that, but still not completely from the state. You notice these have the blue annotation. The Planning and Zoning Board at a high level recommended approval of the first part of this ordinance with some recommended changes, and they recommended denial of the second piece of this, which is the kind of the accessory to. So I'll go into a little more depth on both of those. So the first part of the ordinance, the 56.05, mobile food dispensing vehicles temporary. The idea here is that we would set hours of operation and geographic area where a mobile food truck can operate. Like they could go set up in the Lowe's parking lot with the permission of Lowe's. And they could vend between hours of 8 and 10 p.m. They can't operate on the rights of way. We had originally proposed that it would be limited to one vehicle per parcel. You can't store them there overnight. You can't just set them up there and leave them there. You need to take them, go back wherever you came from when you're not in operation. And you have to dispose of all your waste products in accordance with state and federal regulations. So the board, the Planning and Zoning Board, as I said, when they reviewed this, they were generally supportive of this section of the ordinance. They did have some further recommendations that I would like to get clarification from the board tonight, or consensus. The first of that is they wanted, and have some maps later in the presentation, they wanted to further kind of limit the area there where they could operate. As it was currently drafted, basically if the zoning district allowed retail sales or restaurants as a permitted use, you could operate a mobile food vendor at that particular location. That did exclude the Sponge Docks and the CRA special area plan. The second recommendation that they made would be to further limit the hours of operation to that of the host business. So if it's a 24-hour business, so out on US 19, if there's a CVS or something that's open 24 hours a day, you still can only operate between 8 a.m. and 10 p.m. But if the business closes earlier than that, so let's say they close at 8, then the mobile food vendor would have to stop operations at 8 and get off the site as well. The other recommendation that the board made was that they wanted some consideration for, if it's a large parcel of land, do we want to maybe allow more than one? So this map shows, as the ordinance is drafted right now, this is where the mobile food vendors operate, with the exclusion of this kind of bright green area. That's the special area plan, but I wanted to show it on the map for reference. So all these other districts, the highway business, general business, the industrial areas, the Planning and Zoning Board was very supportive of allowing this in industrial areas because they recognize that there's just not a lot of places close by for people to run to lunch and things like that. But as it's currently drafted, you also have some areas that are right outside the special area plan boundary where you could do this by the way it's drafted right now. And the board was concerned about having any encroachment at all into the Sponge Docks and the CRA area. They also, were cognizant of, well, you've got some, you've got these little pockets out in residential areas where you've got a gas station and a restaurant. So they were being mindful of that, and they really recommended that we find a way to restrict that a little further. So in taking another look at that, I pulled together a map that is this is just the highway business zoning and all of our industrial zoning. And so that, you see, really starts to tighten up the area. It's really limiting it to the US 19 corridor and the industrial areas out in the North Anclote area, and a small area to the south on South US Alt 19. So that tightens it up a bit, and I think puts a little tighter box around it. I didn't have that map for the P&Z, so I'm kind of, channeling what they were talking about and where I think they were going. The second part of the ordinance is the 5606 mobile and food dispensing vehicles as accessory to a food or drink establishment. And again, the board was not supportive of at this point. They did say that they would, like to see some additional work on it and have it maybe come back. So I won't go into the real details of this unless you want to discuss it and if you're supportive of it. But we did lay out specific criteria. You had to be a food or drink, I'm sorry, a food or drink establishment existing, so a restaurant or a brewery already. So, and this really would be deemed accessory to your business. It would allow, a second or a non-affiliated food truck. So if, person B has their own food truck and their own thing, and they want it, they could cut you through an operating agreement, they could set up on your site. So it was fairly broad in what it would allow. So the discussion points really for the temporary, the allowable locations, the hours of operation. I don't think really there's too much to discuss too much about public streets and city-owned property. I think we're clear on that. And then the number of allowed per parcel. And then on the accessory use to a food or drink establishment, again, the bigger picture of, do you want to move forward with that tonight, or do you want to take that back and maybe take a deeper dive on that before we consider approving that? So I'll stop there, and I'll be happy to answer any questions that I can.
Thank you, Ms. Vincent. Thank you for the presentation. Thank you for all the hard work you've been doing.
I'll unshare my screen here.
Okay.
Well, let's see. Can't figure out how to do that at the moment. Oh, there it is. Sorry. Okay.
Okay. Mrs. Vincent, thank you for the presentation and all the hard work that you've been doing since you came back to Tarpon Springs. I would like to say that I'm very disappointed with our legislators for mandating and interfering with our home rule again. And by bypassing the House Bill 1183, we obligated dedicated location for food trucks. Ms. Vincent, I agree with our planning and zoning board that I support the 5605. But I don't know what's going on.
Not either. I'm going to turn off my microphone in case that might be causing a problem.
Well, I think we're okay. It was Ms. Lemon's mic. She's fine now. She's muted.
Okay. What I would like to say is the 5605, I recommend the recommendations of the planning and zoning that I will support that on the highway district as well as the industrial area. I think that will be very useful. But in regards to the 5606, I will not support that. And the reason for that is, even though that I like food trucks and for special events and city festivals and the state fair, but here in Tarpon Springs, we've been working very hard to improve the CRA and the sponge docks. We offering facade improvement grants, interior renovation grants, restaurant recruitment grants, and bring the buildings up to the code grants. And continuously, we're doing beautification projects to make it nicer and enjoyable for the residents and to attract more businesses to Tarpon Springs. Our restaurant owners spending a lot of money going through many regulations to be able to operate the restaurants. I don't think that we should be allow them to put a trailer or a mobile food truck right next to their businesses or behind their businesses. I will not support that. With that, I would like to go to Vice Mayor Carr.
Thanks, Mayor. Renee, I just have a couple questions for you. So with 56.06, would that allow food trucks within the SPA or special area plan?
It would, yes, it would, but only as accessory. It would have to be accessory to an existing established either restaurant or drink establishment. So like the breweries, or if you had a bar, something like that that doesn't routinely have food. So it would have to be accessory to a business like that.
Okay, what about an ice cream shop?
That's a question.
Right.
Like the ice cream shops and like the lunch stands and things, I think are something that, and I think I had put that in, as a discussion point if we were going to move forward. Do you need to have a minimum seating, within the primary establishment, which I think we probably should, because we're basically saying that the host establishment has to be able to provide services. So bathrooms, seating, sanitation facilities and things of that. So we haven't, I think there's a bit of a gap still there on that piece of it.
Yeah. So, I mean, from my end, if I visit a food truck in another city, it's generally because I'm driving by, I need to grab something quick. I don't want to run up to Publix or run in somewhere quick just to grab a sandwich or something fast. So I'm not really looking to sit down at a food truck. Typically, it's more of a grab and go, in my opinion. What other issues did the P&Z have with 56.06?
I think the general consensus was that, the existing restaurants have obviously had to expend considerable money on a bricks and mortar restaurant and putting improvements into those. That is, basically it's not inexpensive to open a restaurant, from the investment standpoint. And so I believe that, the consensus was that, by bringing in a mobile food truck, you're kind of circumventing that investment. And so I think, that was the major concern with the Planning and Zoning Board.
Okay. So, I mean, from my thought process with like an accessory truck, I think it makes sense to have available. And something to think about too with the food trucks is I think Backdraft started off as a food truck and then they transitioned to like a full-time restaurant. You have a lot of people that have goals and aspirations to open up a restaurant, but the capital is extensive to get started. So the food truck, I think, is a great opportunity as a stepping stone to get into becoming a restaurant and getting really to find out if you're going to be successful or not. Because to put $40,000-$50,000 up and then fall flat in your face 2 months later, one, it's an embarrassment. Secondly, you've lost a lot of capital, where it's maybe lesser cost for a food truck to get going. So looking at this, the secondary food trucks, they would need to be or the, how do I say it? Accessory food truck in 56.06, they would need to be connected to like the main power. So like a 30 or 50 amp. So there wouldn't be like a generator out there running, right?
Correct. That's something that we've, from a staff perspective, when I vetted this through the other departments and even talking with Karen and stuff, and just looking at locationally where these potentially could end up, I don't want a food truck banging out a generator across from outdoor seating at another restaurant or in a where you might have a residential area. So we did want to require that they have the ability to tie into the electric for their power.
Okay. So I understand the planning and zoning brought up that they just want to see maybe in the highway business and industrial areas. Was there any discussions like to have available like once a month or 1 week in a month food trucks and available in the SPA at all?
Oh, let me be clear. At no point would this override the city's special event ordinance. So, just like you have now. So like First Fridays or things like that. If a special event gets approved by the board, then yes, you can do that anywhere in the city.
Okay. So, I mean, but like a non-special event, let's just say like part of the ordinance, it would be food trucks are allowed within the SPA the first weekend of every month. Was that discussion brought up at all?
Then we did not discuss that approach, no.
Okay. Also from my standpoint, I am a patron to many restaurants in Tarpon Springs. Having 2 young kids, it's much easier to grab some to-go food than cook right now. So I completely support what the mayor was saying with supporting a local restaurants. I do think there's some flexibility though to allow some food trucks in Tarpon Springs outside of the highway business. I don't know exactly what that would look like. But I mean, US 19 is a perfect example of where food trucks could work, and also on Ultra 19. I would like to see maybe a special weekend, if it's like 1 weekend a month where food trucks are allowed potentially within the SPA. And then I do support the 56.06 with the accessory food truck to establishments. I think it's a nice complement to the breweries. Typically when you have a brewery, there's no food available, but you're hanging out, and it's nice to have something that you could grab. And then it also gives a business owner a chance to get their feet wet in this type of industry as well. So I think the 56.06 is actually a nice thing to have. You have a picture of Rusty Bellies here as an example. I know they use that for their burgers to go on like the first Thursday and Wednesday of the month. Would that ultimately ban them from using their food truck in that situation?
So in the past, so I'm going to make a fine distinction here. In the past, these, having like a food truck like Rusty Bellies does, didn't necessarily, it wasn't considered under the existing accessory use ordinance. So in Article 2, under your general use regulations, every zoning district, you can have an accessory use that is complementary to the primary business, that's subordinate in nature and complementary or an extension of an existing business. So I think you can make an argument under the existing code right now that what Rusty Bellies has would be, because they own that truck. It's an extension of their business. Their business name is on it. It's not a third party out coming in. I think you could make an argument right now that would be allowable. as long as it, is otherwise meeting, regulations of the city. So I'll be candid, I don't think that that's been an interpretation of the past, but I would be very comfortable with that, as a zoning, as a zoning director. So that's maybe a larger discussion, I would prefer to see something get into the code that's clear about it, but I think right now, under the accessory use section of the code, you could consider that.
Okay, so 56.06 isn't passed tonight. Does that stay in place then for the existing code?
The existing accessory use section of the code in Article 2 of the Land Development Code, there's a broad accessory use ordinance in place already that I think you could logically, say that, a food truck like what Rusty Bellies has is accessory to their primary business. They own it, they operate it, and it's part of their business. I would be hard pressed to say no to that, but I mean, that would be my interpretation.
Okay, thank you. And then one last clarifying question. Let's say a business owner gets a property they want, they lease it, but they don't have the funds to put together a full kitchen that might cost a significant amount of money and investment, but they have a food truck. Are they able to use that as an accessory to food and drink establishments if they don't have an operating kitchen?
It really boils down to what's considered, and some of that's, splicing fine hairs. If the primary business needs to be you need to have a legitimate primary business established. So, you can take a view that, and I'm happy to discuss pros and cons of this, that, you have a limited amount of food production that can come out of a food truck. And so as long as it truly is accessory to that primary business and supports their business, so if it's an outdoor restaurant or something, or not a restaurant, but an outdoor bar, let's say, where they don't really have the ability to put in a commercial kitchen, but their primary, the bulk of their money is being made as a bar, is the food service accessory. So that's something you really have to kind of weigh, but I think there's an argument that you can make that under the existing accessory use ordinance that we have.
Okay.
5606. What you definitely cannot do is have an outside vendor come onto your site and set up shop. That you absolutely cannot do under the current code.
Okay, got it. All right, thank you. No further questions.
Commissioner Terrapini.
Thank you. So Ms. Vincent, just based on like kind of the conversation that you just had with the vice mayor, right? My thinking is that if you're already an established business, right, and you're applying for an accessory use of a food truck downtown on Tarpon Avenue for your existing business, you're saying that within the Section 2 of the existing Land Development Code, one could already apply for that regardless of what we decide tonight on 5606?
I think you can I think that is a logical interpretation. Can you park it on Tarpon Avenue? No, of course not.
You got to do it on site.
So you've got to be able to functionally, locate it on the site, still meet your required parking, all of that stuff. So yes, I think you could make a legitimate argument under that existing accessory use section of Article 2 that would be, is it accessory? Is it supporting of the primary business? And is it subordinate in nature? That's really the things that you have to look at.
So if one could meet that, in the existing code, you could have this food truck as an accessory use in the CRA and special area plan, et cetera.
I think you could do it anywhere.
Okay.
Now, I'm going to be candid with you. That's not the interpretation that's been made in the past. I'm saying my current, interpretation is that yes, you could, because the code's completely silent to mobile food trucks. So what is accessory? So, and you have to look at that section and parse through it. But yes, I think that would be applicable.
And if the board followed the recommendation of the Planning and Zoning Board and denied 5606, it's still applicable. You can still have an accessory use as it relates to this food truck or trailer, assuming you met all the other criteria.
Correct. That would be my interpretation of the ordinance.
Okay.
Obviously, that.
So let me tell you why I think that's important.
Okay.
Is because if you're already if it's already an accessory use, if you're already in business as a restaurant or a bar or whatever, don't get me wrong, I understand where the mayor's coming from in terms of, excuse me, the capital required and what the city's doing in terms of our efforts to recruit new restaurants and code updates and things like that. I understand all that. But if you're already in business, right, and you have the means on your site to meet the additional criteria to enable you to have a food truck as an accessory use, then what's the difference? Right? I mean, if 56, what the difference is?
Ordinance? What's the difference with the new ordinance?
Right. I'm saying if you take 5606 and you take the existing Article 2 of the Land Development Code, where's the difference?
So the difference would be, one, we're clearly establishing criteria that don't exist. So additional criteria, but I think the biggest fine point on it is the way it's written today under Article 2 and the accessory use ordinance today. I would not be comfortable with a third party vendor or an outside vendor bringing a separate, something that's not, you don't own, the restaurant doesn't have that investment. So they don't own it and they don't operate it. They have somebody else bringing it on site and operating it. I think that's, to me, that's a distinction between the existing code and what 5606 would do.
Gotcha. So 5606 would enable a third party to come and do it. Gotcha.
Correct. And put those additional criteria in place.
Okay. So I think that I'm in support of the additional criteria of 5606 to help the ordinance, Article 2, but I'm not in favor of a third party. So I feel like if you have the third party, then it's not an accessory use, right? Because it's not yours.
It's another primary use, correct?
Exactly. Right. So you understand where I'm at?
I do, perfectly.
Okay. That's where I'm at. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Commissioner Donovan?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I think I'm kind of picking up on the vibe of the commission. I think we're all kind of pulling in the same direction where, we want to do what we can to allow restaurants to be empowered, make creative decisions, especially in a time like this. And you also don't want to introduce unfair competition to maybe some of their neighboring restaurants or something like that. This is something that I actually spoke with Miss Vincent earlier about. So I really appreciate you, Miss Vincent, for working with me. And I actually got the code pulled up that we keep talking about, that accessory use code. And it says an accessory use is a use or structure which complies with the following standards. It is clearly incidental to, customarily found in, association with, and serves a primary use. 2, is subordinate in purpose, area, and extent to the primary use served. 3, contributes to the comfort, convenience, or necessity of the primary use served. 4, is located on the same lot, tract, parcel, or property as the primary use. So I feel pretty comfortable with that. I think I completely agree with you, Ms. Vincent, and that I feel comfortable with that, protecting a business from having a food truck that is directly there. So namely places like Rusty Bellies or Bayou Bistro, I think they would be protected under that exists right now, just being that it is serving their primary use as well. So I do definitely want to make that distinction between what we're talking about tonight and them, because I think they're protected regardless of what we do with, 56.06. When it comes to the third party stuff, I guess if you could just paint a better picture for me, because I know a discussion point is the private property versus public streets. Is that really a discussion point, or are we all pretty clear that we don't want them on a public street?
I don't want it on a public street.
I don't want anything on public streets either.
Okay. Yeah, I just want to make that clear, because that seemed to me like we were all pretty much in agreement at this point that, as long as it was on a private property. Really, again, I don't want to hinder any businesses from helping themselves. So when it comes to, 56.06, I would support it, but at the same time, I really want to make sure that everybody understands that those, that those other businesses that are already in use are protected. I look forward to hearing what the rest of the board has to say.
Commissioner Vaticius?
Thank you, Mayor. I think I'm going along with the majority right now, but there's some details here that kind of a couple of twists and turns from a couple of the commissioners that if we could kind of standardize the what we're looking at, that would be very helpful. But I wanted to start with the 05 first, 5605. By the way, I listened to the public and the Planning and Zoning Commission meeting, and it was a very interesting meeting. And I appreciated what they were saying. And I know there were a couple of helpful other suggestions in there as well that we haven't talked about tonight. But on the 50, getting the state requirement out of the way first, the 5605, I'm not thrilled with allowing a food truck to operate until 10 o'clock at night. I'm not sure who would be using it at 10 o'clock at night, but certainly 8 o'clock would be fine, something a little more reasonable. And if the other commissioners could kind of make note of that so we can kind of come to some consensus on that, that would be very helpful. I'm not in favor of allowing more than one food truck per larger parcel. Those were the two P&Z recommendations, that two of them. And then also agreed, there was a singled out, which I don't think we talked about tonight. There was that little green square out there on Gulf Road, which was next to Jimmy's Restaurant. I think it was the, is it the Marathon or one of the gas stations?
Gas station and Jimmy's, yes.
Right.
That actually, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, sir.
Go ahead. You were going to
Okay.
say that's changed now, or?
So the second map that I had up, I had kind of was what I would recommend that we do, which would just be the highway business and the industrial districts. That will take out the Jimmy's and there's even some small parcels that really are right directly adjacent to the special area plan boundary, where if the way it's written right now, where they would be allowed. So what I'm recommending, based on the planning and zoning board discussion and what I'm hearing tonight, is that if you look at the second map in my presentation, that's just the highway business and industrial. That's where we would limit those two.
That's the only thing I picked up on that, and I thought that was a good idea to exclude that one out there anyway, in addition to the ones you're talking about now. Also for the industrial areas and maybe the highway business district, I think 8 o'clock is a little too late. I think Home Depot and Lowe's opens at 7, I believe. And some of these industrial businesses that we have out on Anclo, people are going to be showing up at 7, wanting to drink their coffee and stuff before they get into it. But I'd like to have some consideration for maybe changing that 8 a.m. to a 7 a.m. in the morning for the highway business district and industrial area north of the Anclo. That's kind of a self-regulating time frame anyway. But on the other hand, 10 o'clock I think is too late. Ms. Vincent, I know they have to go home at night, that sort of thing, but there's nothing that I've seen in the ordinance that would discourage a food truck from being at the same location 365 days a
No,
year.
sir, that would be fine.
Okay, and I just want to point that out to the commissioners, that if anyone has some reservations on that, I think we should talk about that because that's not in there. So that's the 5605. 5606. It was a pretty interesting discussion on the P&Z, and it was pretty cut and dry. No food trucks in the sponge docks in the downtown district. And for the reasons that were cited as far as the investment and protecting existing restaurants and things. But my my sense is that some of the businesses that I've talked to that right now are closed down because they've fallen into this trap of being in the category of a bar and a nightclub, but they're a brewery and a winery, but they can't open because the state sees them as a bar and a nightclub, and they've tried to get some relief. And maybe there's something that Ms. Vincent, you can say, maybe there's been some relief, and Ms. Lemons is here tonight on that. But there, a brewery opened up as a brewery. It didn't open up to be a restaurant. And I know the one brewery that I've had some discussions with, they've actually worked out an arrangement, not now, but before COVID, of just the sort of things that Vice Mayor Carr was talking about. People come in and want to have some beers, but they don't want to continue drinking on an empty stomach. So they've made arrangements with an adjacent restaurant to order there, and then the restaurant actually delivers the food at the brewery, which I think was a nice match. But with this COVID thing, it's kind of not allowed that any longer, and they have no option. So the only other option was to try and get some kind of a business license through the use of something like a food truck in order to be able to keep their doors open, not as a restaurant, but as a brewery, because of this problem that they've had with the state. The one thing that also in this 5606, it's an accessory use. So I had some questions. It would not be that the food truck would not be the business entity. It would not be, you know, Joe's Hot Dogs serving at
Exactly.
one of the breweries. It would be part of the brewery operation. So they wouldn't be selling out of the food truck, doing
That,
out of the food truck.
so as it's written right now, we were allowing, like that, again, I called them that third party or that independent operator. So instead of having that arrangement with a restaurant coming, you know, and providing food for that, you know, to your patrons, you would allow, you know, a food truck to, you know, maybe from the hours of 5 to 8 p.m. to park on your site and serve food to your customers. So you wouldn't have, that's the way it's drafted right now.
Yeah, I'm not, I think it was Commissioner Terrapini that voiced concern about
Exactly.
and I would be, I'd be concerned about that as well, because the people that I've spoken to are looking at it for the purpose of serving in their restaurants, not serving out of the food truck, because some of the locations that you're going to park this food truck is not conducive for somebody to walk up to the food truck, get their food, and then walk all the way around the building and go inside again.
Exactly.
Okay, so I've expressed my sentiment on that. If you go to your right at the beginning of 5606, where you've got your first sentence, it talks about the food dispensing may be located as an accessory use. And then it would be legally established food subject to the following criteria. And one of these was that it would not follow the standards from above. Am I wrong around that, about that?
No, I think what you were, I wanted to make sure. So directly above, at the very end of 5605,
right,
there's a paragraph I. It says the standards of this section, so 5605, should not. I didn't want those standards to get applied to 5606. I wanted them to be separate. So I think that's the distinction you're talking about.
Right, that is, and thank you for helping me out. But the thing that I'm a little concerned about is that the mobile, some of those standards I think would apply. For example, the mobile food dispensing shall only be authorized on a parcel of land consistent with this section, no more than one mobile food sort of thing. The parcel owner shall obtain a business license or whatever. Then there's some other criteria that, and I think the distinction between the accessory use right now and it not being codified is the fact these other criteria that you're mentioning about hooking up to the city's sewer system and the grease trap program, and not having a generator and having service from the building or some other location without a generator running would apply to the something that would be codified as you're showing it in 5606, but not as it is right now in the section 2 of the Land Development Code. For example, and I don't have a problem with the way things are going. So these restaurants are clean operations, but right now we don't require them to hook up to a grease trap or anything like that at some of these sites that they're located. I don't want to mention any names, but one we are, one we're not. So it just formalizes the process a little more if we do include something like that in the 5606.
Okay.
the thing that Commissioner Terrapini was talking about, and I want to get back into these little, the third party thing, I think is different than if the type of business that can get a food truck would lease it. In other words, it's not hiring some guy that operates a food truck to come onto their restaurant, but if a brewery or some other non-food selling establishment wishes to lease it but not buy it, that would be allowed, or am I wrong? Could they lease a food truck?
Are you directing that at me or Commissioner Terrapini?
No, I'm sorry, to you, Ms. Vincent, for clarification. Under 5606,
As it's currently written, yes, that would be fine. I think the distinction that I'm hearing, kind of the consensus from the board, is they want to kind of take out that third party operator.
Right.
But I think what you're saying is, so if I don't buy the food truck, but I lease it and I operate it as part of my business, is that okay?
yes.
Okay, I mean, it's not covered in here. My thought would be yes.
Maybe on some minimum lease or something, I don't know,
Yeah,
but it's something to make a distinction.
Clarify.
The other thing, I think Vice Mayor Carr talked about something of allowing, and Vice Mayor Carr, correct me if I'm wrong about this, I don't want to misquote you, but something like 1 or 2 weeks out of a month, or 1 or 2 weekends out of a month where food trucks can come into the special area plan. Is that what you were saying, or?
Yeah, I did bring that up, correct.
Okay, I would not be supportive of that. And that gets back to what the mayor was saying. I'd like to have some orderly process to control this. I know we've had problems. I know we've had problems at Epiphany where some of these vendors come in and are somewhat parasitic, and that they hang out on the outskirts of the crowds and things like that and pick people off going into the festivals and things like that. And our police does what it can, but that's the sort of thing, if we're not careful with the special events, then that would continue. The one thing that Commissioner Terrapini brought up that I'd like to offer some additional information, or maybe it was Vice Mayor Carr. I think it's different if a business has a special event where they have to apply for something where they're going to be using public property. I think it's another thing where if they've got some internal little festival that they're having going on, somebody's birthday, or somebody rents the place or something like that, and they'd like to have some additional food brought in. I think, and this is just a hypothetical, I think in that particular case, it would be a special event, but it wouldn't be a special event as we understand it through the, go ahead, Ms. Vincent.
Yeah, so I failed to mention the other section of our land development code, the overall, you can get a 90-day temporary use permit through the technical review committee. So you see those come up for things like the Christmas tree sales and the pumpkin patches and things like that. So there is a relief valve there for that if necessary.
And that would be fine. We don't need to address that. The last thing, I know Mr. Seaman, the chairman of the P&Z, talked about with this reluctance of the 5606 on the in the discussion that night. He brought up perhaps a conditional use for the purpose of relieving the problems that we've got during COVID. And I don't know, in all honesty, whether we would be here talking about this tonight, other than the state, of course. But if it wasn't for COVID, the 5606 part, because I think that's what initiated this process of trying to get some relief. And I think what Mr. Seaman was talking about was a food truck as a conditional use. But I kind of looked at it different, and you said there would be a problem with that, or whoever was there said that there would.
The attorneys were, the attorney there that evening expressed a little bit of concern because the state has weighed in on this, that if we set it up as a conditional use and one was granted and then another one was denied in a similar situation, that we could be kind of setting ourselves up potentially for a challenge. So that was expressed by the attorney at the meeting.
Okay. The angle that I was thinking about was actually the restaurant it not being keyed off the restaurant. In other words, the restaurant's having a hardship such as a kitchen fire or something like COVID or some other thing that shuts them down in the kitchen. And there's a variety of tools at their disposal. An outdoor cooking facility, which is different than a food truck, which is licensed through the state, a food truck, that sort of thing. So we're not keying off the idea of a food truck and allowing a food truck to be brought in, but for this business, but for somebody else, we're not. That business would be bringing in a food truck for a specific problem that they're having or a specific issue that they're having. And I think that distinction could be made. So if we don't go with a 5606 tonight, I'd like some consideration going back to providing the ability of the city to provide some relief to food establishments, whether they're restaurants or something else on an emergency basis that would allow them to use a food truck or something else to help them relieve the issue rather than allowing only pinning it down to just a food truck and that's all you can have, I guess is what I'm getting at.
And if I can take a moment to address that. So again, I think our temporary use permit process that allows a temporary use for up to 90 days, and you can get it up to a 90-day extension to that. It has to go through the technical review committee. I think that can cover a wide range of these things. So you can potentially get relief for up to 180 days under that section of the code. So I think that would, and that's exactly what Brighter Days Brewing, they've gone through the TRC to get to get a 90-day temporary use permit to have a food truck, but it really associating with their opening. So, so there's a finite end to it. And so they've gone through that process. So we have a bit of a relief mechanism there for that.
I think that was it. Those are the things. I agree with everybody. And I agree with Commissioner Terrapini on the not the third party, or may have been Vice Mayor Carr. I don't like the idea of the 1 or 2 weekends out of a month for a food truck having open access to the special area plan. Also, I'd like there to be consideration to change the time in 5605 from 10 o'clock to 8 p.m. It's the longest, and then from 8 o'clock to 7 a.m. for allowing them to be there. And then also those little, what would you call it? Those little areas, those little green dots taken out to confirm that we're going to do that. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Ms. Vincent, a couple of things just for clarification. The 5606 accessory to food drink establishment, once they installed, they become a permanent, don't they?
No, they really don't. The intent is not that this thing, gets parked here and becomes immobile forever. In fact, we wanted to have a detachable, shore power, if you want to use that term, connection, so that they have electric. But we also require that they have to be able to maintain as a functioning mobile vehicle. So case in point, if we have a hurricane event, they need to be able to move that vehicle out of the hazard area and secure it somewhere else. So no, the intent is that it doesn't you park it there and then you start adding structures to it and build around it. That's definitely not the intent of this.
But once it becomes, once the vehicle is placed there, there's no time limit for them to remove it.
Correct. Yes, sir.
So that can be there forever.
It could, yes.
Okay, so it is permanent.
Yes, it's permanent but movable.
Okay.
I guess that's the distinction.
Okay. The other thing that I'd like to clarify is we know there was an interest with the wine and brewing establishments to use the food trucks to serve food in order for them to stay open during the coronavirus regulations. But this problem, I believe, it has been solved because now they're able to get the 501 license, so they can actually open the those wine establishments. Isn't that correct?
I'm going to defer to Karen Lemons for that question. She's been in contact with the businesses, so she can answer.
So that's not an issue anymore.
Hi, Karen Lemons, Economic Development Manager. Yes, 3 of our breweries have gone to get their 509 food licenses. And that's because, as Commissioner Vaticulis was saying earlier, previously they were allowed to have a relationship with a nearby restaurant, and that worked out really well. They had their menus there and they were able to open. But this time, that was not allowed. So DPR was not allowing the breweries and the bars to open unless they actually had a 509 food license, and then they could resume in-person consumption. So 3 of our breweries did get those 509 licenses. And as Ms. Vincent stated, Better Days has a food truck out there right now. That was their grand opening.
You're muted. I can't hear anything. Is it just me?
I don't hear anything either.
Mrs. Lemon, the sound is pretty bad. I'm not sure if we all understood what you said.
I think, in having spoken with Karen, I think I can summarize for her. So I don't know if all of the breweries have accomplished this, but I know that some of them have been able to, they found another outlet, if you will. They've been able to get, some type of a food license from the state. So whether it's, a hot dog roller cart or something like that, they've been able to fill that void in order to be able to be able to open. So that, I believe, and Karen, I'll let you nod yes or no. Have all of them been able to do that, or just some of them? Okay.
But they all have the ability to do that, correct?
Yeah,
Is that yes?
They can apply, yes.
Okay. Yeah, I just want to make that clear because I know Commissioner Vaticulis had a question on that.
Yes.
Thank you. If there's no more comments on this issue, I would like to go to the public comments.
Mayor, I just have a quick comment for you. There wasn't any discussion about the beaches at all. I know Pinellas County has the rights of Fred Howard Park, and City of Tarpon has Sunset Beach. Has staff, I mean, this doesn't allow any food trucks out of the beaches. Has staff evaluated that, or is there any discussion at the P&Z at all?
There was no discussion at the P&Z, I don't believe. We didn't even go down that path, quite honestly. That I know that has come up and in the past and has been discussed, and there was no, at that point in time, I don't think there was any consensus that the city wanted to do that. I don't know if there are restrictions in place that they can't do that, at least at our park. So no, we just didn't go there. I knew that there was some reluctance in the past to do that, so I didn't want to open that can of worms.
Okay. And then Ms. Vincent, from your standpoint, do you want to wait before the motion after public comment to get a consensus on what your questions were to clear that up for you?
Vice Mayor, I think we ought to go to the public comments to hear from the public, and then we come back and go for consensus.
Okay, thanks.
Ms. Jacobs, have we received any emails on this item?
Yes, we've received a few. The first one is, to whom it may concern. My name is Irene Manglis. I reside at 1307 Mears Boulevard. I am the owner of Melly Greek Street Donuts. My business is a mobile food trailer. I am not sure how this works, so please forgive me. I was pleased with the new rules and happy that I was able to operate in our small town as of July 1st, 2020. Now it comes to my attention that the mobile units must be on US Highway 19 only. This is very disappointing. I have spent a lot of time and money on my small business, and with COVID-19 happening, all events in our town have been canceled. My business has been welcomed by the Sponge Docks and our community. I have an agreement and a lease with a business already in place prior to this meeting. My mobile unit will add character and color to our town, and I believe it will attract tourists. I do not want to work on US Highway 19. That is not fair. I have attached 2 photos for your review that will be in the record, and also if any commissioner would like, I could forward that. I believe the unit should be able to operate in the Sponge Docks or downtown only if the unit has support from the businesses in the area, a lease or written agreement. As it was stated in the city's prior notice, this will prevent random food units coming and parking wherever they please. I do not believe they should be banned as a whole, but with restrictions. My next concern are the hours of operation. Most of our restaurants in town close around 10 p.m. Our other options are fast food. The unit should have option to operate until 2 a.m. The city is planning on mobile food units to operate from 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. The local bars are open until 2 a.m. Since most of the restaurants in town are closed at 10 p.m., there should be more options other than fast food. This too will help small businesses. Thank you for your time, Irene Manglis, Maley Greek Street Donuts. The next one, as members of the Tarpon Springs Merchants Board, we have spoken to several interested Tarpon Springs retail food and drink owners to determine their options about the new proposals that will be discussed tonight at the BOC meeting. We understand the P&Z has approved number 1 to allow mobile trucks to operate, but outside the downtown and CRA and Sponge Docks. We are hoping that the BOC members will accept this recommendation. We are asking the board to consider accepting the second proposal. We have spoken to many of our merchants. We are hearing that the majority of our food, drink, and retail store owners are in favor of a food and beverage truck or a cart on their own property, and this would be a feature that would promote their business. We also agree with the business owners that they should not be required to pay an additional fee to have this venue on their own property, whether it is an extension of their existing business. We do understand that this should only be approved with a proper food and beverage license. Examples of our many business owners who support this proposal and would benefit from adding a feature outside to promote businesses along Alt 19 include Tarpon Home and Garden and the Relics, Bohemian Gypsy, and Tarpon Springs Distillery. Most examples include Brighter Day Brewery on Safford, Two Frogs downtown with a large backyard, and Silver King on Lemon Street, to name only a few. Also, we are asking the board to also consider a fruit and beverage cart that would be a smaller venue that would allow a business just like Five Branches Brewery in the Sponge Docks to promote their business by having a special for the weekend or tacos to go with your beer, as an example. There are many retail stores, restaurants, breweries, and bars that would benefit by giving their customers more reason to visit and enjoy Tarpon Springs. We are hoping that our mayor, city manager, and city commission will look at this as an opportunity to give the business owners a venue to create something interesting, new, and exciting for their establishments that will help them stay open. An outside venue allows the opportunity to be creative and try new resources that will allow our retail restaurants, breweries, bars to add features that will be different and interesting that could bring more visitors in this tough shopping environment. This is not only a fair and reasonable thing to do for our business community, but is needed for Tarpon Springs, especially now, to thrive and survive. Thank you for your consideration, Tarpon Springs Merchants Association. The next one, I am writing to you with concern about the proposal to limit food trucks in downtown and the Sponge Docks area of Tarpon Springs. As of July 1st, I understand that it could be allowed to have food trucks in Tarpon Springs and began my business plan to enhance Bohemian Gypsy at 740 North Pinellas Avenue, Tarpon Springs, with a food truck or cart, and then really give desperately needed facelift to the property that I am renting there. It would include a garden and seating and clean up the road frontage of the broken concrete and fix the parking lot. Adding a food truck would add much needed attention to my business and offset some of the expense of renovations. I am also involved with the garden and the Relic next door and Tarpon Home and Garden at 510 North Pinellas. Dave Stearns and I have spent huge amounts of money and time to try to not only stay in business during these stressful times, but also to enhance those businesses to help draw people to Tarpon Springs. We have also considered adding a food truck to Tarpon Home and Garden. While some merchants feel the food trucks or added businesses take away from their own business, I strongly disagree. Food trucks done correctly in our downtown and Sponge Docks can only enhance the charm of Tarpon Springs. The more food and shopping that we have in the area, the more people will be attracting to the area and everyone will win. These changes will encourage visitors from the past to come out and visit again, as we are an ever evolving community with always something new to see. In closing, I would like to state the obvious. The restrictions on events throughout the state have been hard on the food truck industry. Besides helping our community grow, we are helping an overall economy by adding revenue to those that would otherwise be seeking unemployment benefits. Thank you for taking the time to listen to my concerns. Respectfully, Ginger Megidis, Bohemian Gardens, Tarpon Home and Garden, and Tarpon and the Relic. And the last one, To whom it may concern, I am opposed to the restriction of food truck locations. This is not a safety concern of COVID. This is a Greek mafia shakedown. We as citizens are tired of the 5 business owners controlling everything in the city. Tarpon could be thriving like other coastal towns like Dunedin, but it is a constant battle for the new business to come to the area. Instead, we have restraint locations that open for 6 months and close. Every store on the dock sells the same stuff. If they are restricted, they will just go to other cities that welcome them, creating economic business for other cities. Some of us want to see our town thrive and our home values go up. Your concerned citizen, Megan Perry. And Mayor, that's all I have.
Thank you. Mr. Jump, do we have anyone that wishes to speak?
Yes, sir. We have several raised hands. I'll allow the first one in.
Thank you.
Hello?
Yes, sir. If you'd state your name and address for the record.
Oh, I'm sorry. You guys didn't say whose name first, so I wasn't sure who it was. My name's Anthony Sarukas, 1055 North Pinellas Avenue, Tarpon Springs, Florida. All I'm asking for is to respectfully request deferring this, just so that we can have some workshops around it. I posted something on Facebook about it this afternoon, only a couple of hours before this meeting, and between my personal Facebook page and what I shared on the Tarpon community page, there's over 100 comments supporting having food trucks or being more open to the conversation at least. So, I mean, if at least until, we're having actual public meetings and people are back at City Hall, can we at least defer that we make a decision on a city ordinance until that time? I don't think that that's an unreasonable request. Also, a misconception is that these food trucks are cheap, and they're not. The average cost is between $26,000 and $120,000, and they're saying that, or generally speaking, through these groups that I've been participating in, the startup costs for the first year out of pocket are around $105,000. And I know that places have opened in Tarpon, with 30 or 40 grand and open and close doors, rather quickly. So, I mean, capital improvements, are using Commissioner Carr's example of Backdrafts being a food truck first and then becoming a restaurant, a great restaurant for our city. I mean, I think that example is, awesome. Bayou Bistro is, one of our greatest, new additions to the whole city. So, I mean, I wish that people be a little more open to it. Also, for the CRA, the extension of the north part of that now includes my property there right before the bridge. So this would eliminate my ability to put a food truck in there, which even though my regular zoning would have allowed for the other types of uses, restaurant, drinking establishment, etc. If these ordinances become, or if these ordinances end up being voted on and it eliminates my option for this, I mean, that's unfortunate because it's a huge undeveloped property waterfront. I'm trying to get Tarpon Tom to come there and do kayak rentals. I'm trying to do something that's going to be good in that corridor because Alt 19, it's really not the prettiest. But I don't want to take up a whole lot of time. I would just say, hey, can we do some workshops around this at least and talk about it? Because really, I think that people do have a need for this in Tarpon, or it just seems like maybe opinions about it have shifted, especially during this whole COVID scenario. But I guess that's it. Thank y'all. And it's, great to see y'all. And stay safe.
Thank you.
I'll allow the next person in.
Hi, everybody. My name is Jerry Brown. I spoke to you a couple months back on this very issue. I had the opportunity right after that meeting to meet with Commissioner Vaticiotis and Renee Vincent at my business, Five Branches Brewing on the Sponge Docks. I just wanted to talk about a couple issues. Since everything that's happened with COVID, we've been closed because we didn't have food, open because we had a food arrangement, closed because we didn't own the food arrangement, and now we're a hot dog restaurant. So this is how things have flowed for us after we have put an investment in the sponge docks. We believe in that area. You can see the sponge diver on the wall when we walk in. But I want you guys to remember that the restaurants are not the only business on the sponge docks. And unfortunately, what it sounds like we're doing is we're treating tourism as a finite resource. The more folks you get downtown, both the locals and the tourists, the more dollars that flow into Tarpon, both in the t-shirt restaurant or t-shirt shops, the restaurants and everything else. And, you know, quite frankly, the previous speaker mentioned that his feedback was overly positive on the issue of having the option of a food truck down on the sponge docks. Now, I understand the restrictions, and I spoke with Commissioner Vaticiotis and Renee Vincent, and but I did want to mention that, you know, we are being forced into this issue, and it's not by you guys, it's by the state. But we want to have the option to operate on a fair business playing field, just like anything else. And, you know, when you go to a lot of folks that go to a brewery go not only for the beer, but they go for the beer and the food pairing. I can go to a brewery down in Sarasota, and one night they're going to have a fish restaurant. The next night they're going to have a pizza place. The next night they're going to have mini donuts. It's just whatever they want to pair their beer with. That's what they bring in. And that's the third party piece that's missing here. And, you know, quite honestly, if we continue that operation and give our consumers a choice, they're going to make the right decision. And they're either going to get my stuff, or they're going to walk next door to Costa's, which we fully support. And folks, even now that we have hot dogs available in our restaurant, they still walk over to Costa's, or they bring the food from Costa's over to our place, or from Mama's, or from Halas, or whomever, and they still make that choice. Let the consumer make the choice for themselves. Don't make it for them. Overall, your constituents are are genuinely positive on the idea of having food trucks down there. Have the restrictions that we keep them on our property. The decibel level of the generators is low enough that they don't cause any complaints. Have some sort of restriction in the policy to do that. But don't make us become restaurateurs, because we don't want to be that. But allow your constituents to have that choice. And that's all I had. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Jump, would you bring the next person?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. If you would please state your name and address for the record.
Tommy Frayne, 1671 Autumnwood Street, Tarpon Springs, Florida, 34689. I'll be pretty brief. I do believe, we need to have some kind of regulations in place about, the type of structures that are allowed, maybe, some regulations about the size of the parking lot, size of the parcels required. But I do think the proposal of just restricting to the highway business and industrial looks overly restrictive, particularly in this economy. But I think this is a mistake that communities make often in trying to defend some other businesses, not really seeing the benefit of welcoming, a diverse business set into the community that, grows the popularity of the community overall. So, everybody wins, the lifts all boats, if you will. So, I do think you guys need to just take a look at that and open it up. I think a lot of the comments already have reflected that. I do want to point out, if anybody has been here, Austin, Texas is obviously a bigger city, but even in the outskirts of Austin, that community has really successfully integrated food trucks and other businesses into their community. And it's obviously, grown in popularity as that community has grown. Again, obviously larger, but I think we can look to communities like that are looking at new ideas for economic development. So thanks so much.
Thank you. Mr. Jim?
I'll allow the next person in.
Thank you.
If you would please state your name and address for the record.
Elijah Durham, 1038 Graywood Avenue. Can you hear me?
Yes,
sir. Thank you.
I'm actually the owner of Soul Burger. We just opened at Brighter Days Brewery, and we had a great response. First, I just want to thank the community. This has been a really awesome experience for us. Kind of turned lemons into lemonade. I just kind of wanted to address a few things that I've heard. One, that was already touched upon, the cost. It is almost equally expensive to open a food trailer or food truck, especially if it is to code, as it is to open a restaurant. So I just kind of want to dispel that. It is certainly not a cheap endeavor, and I've seen equivalent cost on both sides. And this is coming from somebody who's been in the hospitality industry on the culinary side for almost 22 years. The second thing is, I believe, Mr. Vatikiotis, you mentioned about a grease trap. In order to get your MFDV license, you do have to have a city-connected water source, as well as a signed document that says where you will be dumping your gray water. So in order to get your license, that is already taken care of. And so the next thing is, I believe that the biggest thing that I want to mention is that we believe as locals in this community that we can start a food truck and still continue to have that charm that has lured my family here, that has brought us here, and has, even after a tumultuous time of losing my job, has wanted us to stay here. And so, for instance, the concept behind my truck is local. So we went to several bakeries and we found a local bakery for our bread. We have Florida sourced meat. We're working with a local produce vendor that is a local Tarpon Springs produce vendor. So that the idea is, when you buy a burger from me, that the dollars don't just go to filling somebody else's yacht. They come to Tarpon Springs and they stay here. So that's really the biggest thing that I want to say, is that I think that we can have food trucks here within those restrictions. I think the 50 amp plug or the 30 amp plug or whatever you need for your vehicle is a good option, because it says that you're not just coming in here from Tampa or St. Pete or wherever. So I do think that's a good option. And we believe that we can do this and keep the charm of Tarpon Springs. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Mr. John? Do we have somebody else?
If anyone else would like to speak on this item, please raise your hand. And we do not have any raised hands at this time.
Thank you. And it's back to us, to the commission, for more discussion. Ms. Lemons, I don't know if you, I don't know if you are, video conferencing is working or not, but I would like to ask you a question. How many restaurants do we have in Tarpon Springs? Do you know? Ms. Lemons, you mute.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now, sure.
Okay, we have about 50 restaurants in the city, I would say.
We have 50 restaurants. And how many brewings do we have in Tarpon?
We have
Liquor
6.
Stop and we have 6.
Mhm.
So we have 50 restaurants that actually invested quite a bit of money to and go through many regulations to operate the restaurants. And the breweries they open as breweries, not as restaurants. Seems like the 5606 is to accommodate just the brewing restaurants, but not the restaurants themselves. I'm not convinced the 5606 is the right thing to have in Tarpon Springs. But I do support the 5605, and I'm not, I'm flexible in regards to the time, what time they're gonna, how late they're gonna stay open or how early they're going to open. I'm not worried about that. And to have one truck for uh, business area or a lot, I think it's fine. But again, with the 5605 on the highway and on the industrial area, I support that. With the 5606, I'm not. Vice Mayor Carr.
Thanks, Mayor. So looking at the 5605, somebody brought up the idea of allowing the operating times to start at 7 a.m. I would support that. I don't support restricting the cutoff time to be 8 p.m. I think 10 p.m. is a good proposal. If there's a need further, or someone sees the ability that they need something further, I think there could be some discussions further on, but I think that's a good starting point. So with 5606, I think Commissioner Terrapini brought up just to remove the ability of a third party with the businesses. I think that's a good way, if I'm saying that correctly. That would be that the specific business alone. So if it's XYZ restaurant that wants to have a smoker in the back to use for their business, that they would be able to have a smoker. I would like to see the breweries excluded from the list, so they would have an option to bring in a third party on the weekends of some sort. I think that's something that's beneficial to the breweries that I've seen in other cities and other towns based on visiting breweries. I don't drink at all, but I do like to go hang out and socialize. And for me, it gives me the ability to grab something to eat or a soft drink of some sort and still socialize with my friends or family in those areas. So with this 56.06, I would support what Commissioner Terrapini said about that, with just excluding it, or with just the ability for, I'm sorry, let me say this again, removing the ability of a third party and allowing the current business to have some type of accessory food truck or drink establishment, but excluding the breweries, allowing the breweries to have a third party there.
Okay.
Ms. Vincent, does that answer all your pending questions that you had?
Well, yeah, as we see if we get consensus from the rest of the board on that, but yeah, that's the main.
Mayor, just as a courtesy, Vice Mayor Carr, I'd like a little more explanation of the third party. I think my definition was a little different than what he's talking about. Maybe, I'm not really sure. Could you elaborate, or do you want?
Is that a question? That's a question to me, Commissioner Vaticos.
Yes. Could you elaborate a little more as far as the third party aspect of it?
So it would be, for instance, if you had a barbecue restaurant in downtown, you needed a spot to put your smoker in the back, you would have the ability to do that in 56.06. If you wanted to bring in an ice cream shop to your barbecue restaurant and have an ice cream trailer as part of your business, you can't do that because that would be banned. That would be a third party.
Unless you owned it.
unless you owned it. That's
right. Correct,
because it could be a part of an accessory to your business of having a dessert truck in the front of your business.
But not. I'm sorry, I was going to ask, not contracting with them, or my whole thing on the third party was so that they're not actually selling out of that truck to people that aren't going to be using, let's say, for example, the business that they're associated with. That's what I meant by third party. In other words, under the guise of this ordinance, they come in, park at the restaurant, half the people buy food, go into the location that allowed them to park on their property, and then the other half that buy food just walk down the street and things like that. That was my idea of third party. What I meant was that food truck or whatever food trailer would be specific to the business that brought them in, either contractually or leasing it. I'm not sure how to do that, but my concern was not selling to people on the street, I guess is what that weren't at the other establishment there. That's
Okay, that's a little bit of a different distinction then, I believe.
Yeah.
So my standpoint, I don't care if someone sits on the property and eats, or if they walk off the property and eats while they walk down the street. But from a third party standpoint, it's not the owner of the business that would be working or serving food out of that piece of property. That was my understanding of a third party.
The way we drafted it, it was that we would allow, a restaurant or a brewery, whomever, to have a contract with, a completely unrelated food vendor, to say you could come in and set up on my property and we'll provide, facilities for seating and bathrooms and stuff, but at no point can we require that people eat there. I mean, I think that would be like really difficult to try to enforce. I think Commissioner Terrapini's distinction was to not allow that kind of independent third party arrangement to take place. But if I, as the brewery owner, if I want to invest in a food truck that has my name on it and I'm operating it, then that would be allowable. I think is what I heard. I don't know. I'll have to defer to Commissioner Terrapini if that's correct. So it's a bit of a distinction between what the three of you I think are talking about.
I'll pick it up again. I'm sorry, Vice Mayor Carr, continue.
So on my end, I would be able to support 56.06 with the removal of the third parties being allowed on the property, excluding the breweries. I would be fine with the breweries having a third party business on the property myself. And again, 10 p.m. is fine. 7 a.m. I think is good. I think from a demographic standpoint, the younger generation is going to be out later, eating later. And that's one of the struggles in the past of finding a place to eat that's open past 9 o'clock at times that I run into. So thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Terrapini?
Thank you, Mayor. So yeah, I mean, just to kind of highlight my points, we already have an accessory use option in place in Article 2 of the Land Development Code. And let me just, highlight that it has really nothing to do with food trucks or breweries versus restaurants. It's an accessory use to your business. So I don't think that, I don't think it's fair to label the breweries one thing and the restaurants one thing when the intent of the accessory use has nothing to do with them to begin with, right? It has to do with, I'm operating my business. There's an opportunity for me to make more money or to better my business, or there's something that I need for that purpose, and I'm going to gain it via the accessory use. So the biggest distinction in 5606, aside from the accessory use, is the third party, which I think should be removed, which was what we're talking about. And Vice Mayor, to your point regarding the breweries, I see value in that as well. But I would ask you, Ms. Vincent, could we not just apply, could a brewery, if they wanted to have a third party vendor on site, still has to be on site, can't be on the street, if they wanted to have that person to their brewery for a weekend, they would apply for a special event permit. Obviously, there's some hoops to jump through, but that permit would enable them to be able to have that person on and off site for 90 days. Is that correct?
As a temporary use permit, yes, that you could do that. And that's exactly what Brighter has done.
Right. So if you did that, and I'm not saying, I mean, we're just talking about what you could do, right, Vice Mayor? If you did that, you got to jump through the hoops, but I mean, you do that a couple times a year and you're good to go. So that's kind of my thinking. I'm good with 5605 and I'm good with 5606, given that we're going to remove the third party and basically we're just adding more layers of requirements onto an accessory use aspect of the code that already exists today. Thank you.
Commissioner Terrapini, would you tell us about the time of operation? What do you?
Yeah, I'm good with earlier. I mean, but I think what's more pertinent to the discussion is the later hour. So, and I see value in being open later. I see where Ms. Manglis is coming from as far as being open, to service the bars and stuff like that until 2 a.m. But I don't think that I would go with that, but I would stay at 10 p.m. And I'm okay with opening at 7.
Thank you. Donovan?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I'll try to keep it as simple as possible. As far as the time goes, I'm happy to extend the time, from I think originally 8 a.m. to 7 a.m. And I'm also in support of it going up to 10 p.m. or even later, but definitely not 8 p.m. I feel like one of the inherent advantages of those food trucks is being able to be open late. So at least 10 p.m. for the hours. I know I'm going to be in the minority here, but I'm in support of 5605 and 5606, including the third-party vendors. But I mean, obviously, there's going to have to be some compromise there. We've already heard from some members of the board that aren't going to want that, but that's just my stance on it.
Thank you. Commissioner Vaticius?
Commissioner Donovan, you were in support of 5606. You faded out a little bit, but without, can you kind of finish that thought again?
I'm in support of 5606 outright as it's presented in the PowerPoint.
I'm glad you younger guys are allowing an older guy to get to 7 a.m. and I don't stay up that late till 10. So 10 o'clock is okay with me since you evidently know better. So in that regard, the distinction now, the 5606, I know the accessory and everything. The provisions that I was talking about was in the 5606 was the four provisions: the city services, the water and sewer, the compliance with the fog management program, which is the fats, oil, and grease. I don't know that absolutely requires. I know it requires a grease trap, but I don't know beyond that what the role is. But evidently, our staff put that in there for a good reason. And then getting back to the evacuation and mitigation plan, because the Sponge Docks is a low-lying area, I don't think you'd want these expensive trucks hanging around if there's going to be the threat of flooding. And of course, the connection to shore power, 30 or 50 amp, I think is important. Whether 5606 gets passed or not tonight, the accessory use provision in the land, section 2 of the Land Development Code is still applicable. Is that correct, Ms. Vinson?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And also, as far as a third party with a, as I understand it, I mean, the way I'm hearing the commissioners talk, and maybe they understand a little better than I do, maybe, but if you have a food truck there and it's owned by the, or leased by the, not third party, but leased or owned by the restaurant business owner, people that purchase food that is prepared in that food truck could eat at that place of business, or they could take it elsewhere as well. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. We have not made a distinction about that. We have specifically said that the primary seating and restroom facilities have to be available to the patrons of the food truck.
Okay, and then those sort of things that Mr. Brown was speaking of from the Five Branches Brewery, he would be allowed to kind of implement something like he was discussing based on a temporary use permit. Is that correct? Having, let's say, rotating through the various venues.
So he could probably do a temporary use permit for that, if he's doing it on a limited basis. So yeah, and I know there's nothing in the code that says that once a temporary use expires, you can't apply for another one. It does say that you can give another 90-day extension to an existing one, but the code's really silent to how many times a year can you apply. So yes, I think we could probably address that as long as, they don't get, out of hand and it's like a rolling temporary use.
Right. No, I fully understand. And that's where I'm coming from. So excluding somebody like a brewery from this 5606 and allowing third party really doesn't add anything, since this temporary use permit option is still available to them. Is that correct?
I would say that what 5606 would do if it goes as the way it's drafted and you allow the third party, it allows them to go through to the technical review committee once. It's one application, and then they can operate under that. So they don't have to come back, reapply for $100 temporary use permit and go through it over and over again. Okay. But Yeah, but so I guess that would really be the distinction. And plus, 5606, to Commissioner Terrapini's point, it puts some additional criteria in place so that we just don't have right now. But
Right, that's what I was getting at. So what I'm trying to say, it's looking at it a little differently than you do by excluding, by allowing breweries, and I would hope we would do wineries and distilleries along with that.
Sure.
An exception so that they could have third party. It just helps them because technically they could do it anyway through the temporary use permit. We're just removing the hassle of them going through that.
Exactly.
Right. So, okay. So from a government perspective, I always feel good about removing roadblocks and being allowed to do that because they can do it anyway. It just is a little harder way of doing it. So,
right.
And also, again, for the mayor's benefit, I know that he's not on the 5606, but maybe I'm misunderstanding, but it is allowed under the Section 2 of the Land Development Code is an accessory use right now, as Commissioner Terrapini described.
Yes, as long as it's, owned and operated by the primary business. I think when you delve off into that third party category is where, for me, as an interpretation, it gets a little squeamish, frankly.
Okay,
So,
but they could do a temporary use permit through that one.
exactly.
All right, so one way or the other, whether 5606 is in there, it can get done. My rationale for 5606, it just makes people's lives a little easier down there.
And provides good clarity. It removes some gray, murky stuff.
All right.
Takes out the generator for one. I mean, you have to have hard power, which is
No,
a
I
big
agree.
deal.
That's what I'm getting at. The shore power and the other things, the grease trap program is something that I know that's what Bio Bistro had to go through to get their operation going. So everybody went through there. I think the business of being operable is there was a big issue of not putting these food trucks on blocks and putting aprons around them like they're a standalone business.
Exactly.
And for the sake of everybody, historically, and I think the city manager's still there somewhere, we've had an abuse of these sort of temporary food trucks and things in the past at the sponge docks on some of these vacant parcels when they were just, parking lots and things like that, when they were out and out allowed. Or the code was silent on them. And there was all kinds of problems in trying to sort that through. So to summarize, I'm okay with 7, I'm okay with 10, and I'm okay with 5606 with excluding the third party but allowing an exception for breweries, wineries, and distilleries. Again, that's allowed anyway. It could be done anyway. We just remove the inconvenience by doing this 5606. All right, thank you.
Thank you. If we have no more comments, I will entertain a motion.
Okay, let me try it, and commissioners, correct me if I miss anything. So move to approve ordinance, let's see if I got that, 2020-22 with the following conditions that for 5605, we changed the hours of operation from 8 in the morning to 7 a.m. and allow 10 p.m. to remain. And then for 5606 to allow 56 to go forward, except removing third party ability, but allowing exceptions for wineries, breweries, and distilleries. Did I miss anything else?
You clearly said something about the third party. Renee, did you get that?
I did, yes.
We're excluding third party with an exception for breweries, wineries, and distilleries who can have a third party food truck, if you will.
And for clarity, that's just on the privately owned property, right?
That's correct. Yes.
And then who for the exception for the winery, breweries, and whatever, who makes that determination? Staff?
Technical review committee.
Okay,
Yeah,
I'll
that would-
second it.
And roll call, please.
Vaticiotis,
Yes.
Commissioner Donovan,
Yes.
Commissioner Terrapini,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Carr,
Yes.
Mayor LaHousas.
No.
Thank you all. This was easier than I thought.
Okay, we are now going to the item number 11, which is the resolution 2020-56 salary classification plan amendment and pay increase for fiscal year 2021. Staff report, Mr. Licouris.
Yes, are you gonna read the resolution?
Yes.
You have the city attorney read the resolution?
City attorney, if you please read the resolution.
Yes, Mayor. Resolution 2020-56, a resolution of the Board of Commissioners of the City of Tarpon Springs, Florida, authorizing changes in the organization of the Code Enforcement Division of the Police Department and the City Clerk and Collector Department, including the reactivation of a position, revising a salary range and regrading of a position and providing for an effective date hereof. That was a reading of Resolution 2020-56 by title only.
Thank you. Well, we had many discussions during the budget work session. I guess now it's time to pass the resolution, finalize the employee salaries. Mr. Licouris, do you have any staff report on that?
Yes, I provided a little bit of a summary to the backup. We were able to do some things for the lower salaried employees, again, like we've done probably for the last 3 or 4 years. It affected 46 people. And those people were under $15.12 an hour. We were also able to include, as we've said in the letter, the changes you made for the clerk and deputy clerk's position. We were able to do as we've done in past years, the lump sum payment. And if you see my summary on the second page, we did come about 16,000, I believe, under what we had budgeted for there, which again, as I said, that along with the money we saved from the property thing was able to fund the positions. So it's all funded within the budget, and with the extra addition of the savings for the property and casualty. So it's all funded within the budget and ready for your approval tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Licouris. I support your recommendation to give 3% increase to the employees except the lower pay grades, to give them more percentage based on their salaries. I think we must be provide a decent pay to our employees. With that, also I wanted to remind you, Mr. Licouris, that in a couple months you're going to bring us the salary survey for all the positions.
That's correct.
Hourly employees, directors, and charter employees, to make sure that we are comparable to the other cities.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. With that, I will go to Vice Mayor Carr.
Thanks, Mayor. No comments. I support what the mayor said. Looking forward also to seeing the study come back. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Terrapini.
Same, Mayor. No further comments.
Thank you. Commissioner Donovan.
No comments from me, Mayor.
Commissioner Vaticiotis.
No comment.
Thank you. We're going to the public comments. Ms. Jacobs, any emails?
No emails.
Mr. Jump, do we have anyone wishing to speak on this item?
If anyone would like to speak, please raise your hand. And we do not raise hands at this time.
Okay, thank you. The chair will entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
And roll call, please.
Commissioner Vaticiotis,
Yes.
Commissioner Donovan,
Yes.
Commissioner Terrapini,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Carr,
Yes.
Mayor LaHousas.
Yes, thank you. Next is item number 12, Resolution 2020-58, ratified executive orders. City Attorney, if you please read the resolution.
Mayor, Commissioners, Resolution 2020-58, a resolution of the Board of Commissioners of the City of Tarpon Springs, Florida, ratifying Executive Order 2020-28 and extending the declaration of local state of emergency to September 1, 2020, and Executive Order 2020-29 and extending the declaration of local state of emergency to September 8th, 2020, and providing for an effective date hereof. That was a reading of Resolution 2020-58 by title only.
Thank you. Mr. Licorice, do you have staff report?
Nothing other than it's, again, the required 7-day extensions that we have to do for the state of emergency. So these are the two we're bringing to you to continue that.
Thank you. I have no comments, questions. Are there any commission comments?
No.
Ms. Jacob, we'll go to public comments.
No,
Any emails?
no email.
Okay. Mr. Jump, do we have anyone that is wishing to speak on this item?
If anyone would like to speak on this item, please raise your hand. And we do not have any raised hands at this time, sir.
Thank you. We need a motion
Motion approved.
Second.
and roll call, please.
Commissioner Vaticiotis,
Yes.
Commissioner Donovan,
Yes.
Commissioner Terrapini,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Carr,
Yes.
Mayor LaHousas.
Yes, well, that concludes the regular session agenda, and we go to staff comments. Police Chief,
No comments, Mayor. Thank you.
thank you. City Attorney,
No comments, Mayor. Thank you.
thank you. City Manager,
Yes, I want to announce 3 dates. As you know, we've got a group of meetings that we are trying to line up and have in the future. Thank you for sending me your times you would be gone to help me. I've got those first 3 dates set. Make sure they're for your approval on Tuesday, October 6th. A CRA, much needed CRA meeting to discuss a lot of issues and discuss our direction for the new year. On Tuesday, October 20th, our planning project priority discussion. We've talked about a little bit, and I'll be talking to each of you before that meeting to work on that one. And the third one, Monday, November 9th, which I was thinking for to be the Sponge Docks work session, town hall meeting, special session where we hear the concerns and talk about the Sponge Docks that we've, postponed with COVID and stuff. So those are 3 dates. I'll send them to you tomorrow morning in writing. But those are 3 of the dates of the things we've got lined up. I'd also know there's a couple more meetings we need to try to set. And I'll be looking for dates that, meet all of our schedules at a later time, but I wanted to get those 3 out there to everybody for your approval.
Mr. Licorice, those 3 days that you gave us, this is in addition to the regular meetings, right?
Yes.
Okay.
I don't have any issues.
That's all.
I'm okay with those dates.
I'll have to get back to you on that one.
I should be good.
If you could just send us an email too, Mark, so we have it
I
on our
will.
email.
Yes, I will.
Thank you. Okay. We now go to board comments. Vice Mayor Carr.
Yeah, just to follow up, Mark, do we have anything planned? We have a budget public meeting on the 15th, a week from today. Is there anything planned that same day at all? Or is there anything within the CRA that we need to talk about to get anything going?
I don't think so, no.
Okay. All right. Okay. Secondly, I wanted to just thank the police chief and his staff. He sent a memo out earlier last week, I think it was, about some individuals that were doing some graffiti acts throughout Tarpon Springs. Officer Boone, and then I forget the sergeant involved, did a great job tracking these individuals down and cleaning up the graffiti in our town. You may not even noticed it because Officer Boone and the police force were out there cleaning it up pretty quickly. So I just want to say thank you to the police chief and recognize his officers for the hard work that they're doing. And they're really not afraid to get dirty and get their hands dirty. So I really appreciate that and everything you all are doing from that standpoint. Other than that, I hope you all have a great rest of your week and looking forward to next week.
Thank you. Commissioner Terrapini.
No comments, Mayor.
Commissioner Donovan?
Yeah, Mayor, I got one comment. Tarpon Springs High School football is back this Thursday at 7 p.m. We got a home game against Boca Ciega. So if you can make it, I think tickets are still on sale online. You might have to buy one from the Boca Ciega side, but they should still be up there. But other than that, I got no comments.
Thank you. Commissioner Vaticiotis?
Yeah, same Manager LaCourse, that the Sponge Docks Town Hall meeting that you mentioned, we're going to do that virtual. Is that correct? And with that new approach that maybe you were discussing or describing that the IT director was thinking about?
Possibly, if that new approach is available, or we'll just do it a regular Zoom type thing. Either way, I just want to make sure that one is done before the end of the year, since it was promised so far back.
Right. Okay, and with that, I hope we disseminate that information and enough ahead of time so people know how to use the Zoom. I know that's always a challenge for somebody
Yes.
who doesn't normally watch these sort of things, but it's important to them. They want to interact with it, and that could be problematic. And we'll have to figure that out. If we start getting some rumblings, maybe I don't know how we'd do that, but somewhere along the line, I know residents are on their own and they have to come up with their own way of getting into the meetings, but I'd hate to exclude anybody because they're just not technically savvy with Zoom or something like that. But we'll talk about that.
Okay.
The other thing that I had was I wanted to ask about the Sponge Docks Gateway survey and how we're disseminating that. I've gotten a little bit of information that it's posted online somewhere in a couple of spots, I guess. And then also for those who may not be able to get online, especially business owners down at the Sponge Docks and I hope property owners, I just don't know the detail on that part. We're sending them postcards to let them know that if they have difficulty going online to fill them out, that they can call somebody at the city and that they would help them fill it out by telephone. And I'll be honest with you, what's the problem with not just sending them only a postcard, but the survey as well, and giving them the option of one way or the other, and filling it out, mailing it in, or else calling them based on what the postcard says to call in, or just one flyer that says fill this out or call us at this phone number. I'm just a little concerned that people aren't going to pick up the phone and call anybody to give them their thoughts on the Sponge Docks Gateway sign.
It was my understanding we were also going to use our great resource down there, Mick, to go to every business down there and hand that out to them for the availability to do. I'll check and make sure that's still set, but that was the other additional thing besides those things of Nick, just to make copies and go to just drop them off during the course of his duties, which he does very quickly. He's done on other things to drop those to every business on the docks.
Right. I have full confidence in Mick that he'll do a good job. That's not an issue. And I'm glad you're saying that because I just want to make sure that we reach every possible person that we can on this matter. So thank you.
Thank you. Well, this Friday is September 11th, is the Patriot Day and the National Day of Service and Remembrance. And I'd like to take this opportunity to recognize and pay tribute to the individuals lost and injured in that attack, our first responders and all the military personnel who are defending our freedom. September 11th is a day that we always remember, and I'm sure every one of us remember that particular day, what we were doing and how we actually got that information. It's a day that it's a sad day, and we're always going to remember. Well, that concludes the regular session meeting, and it's adjourned at 10:10 p.m. Good night.